The night Daniel Cross agreed to father a billionaire's child, he had $43 in his checking account and a load of laundry waiting at home. Victoria Hale's penthouse overlooked a city that had forgotten people like him existed. She sat across from him, poised, powerful, untouchable, and asked the impossible. Not for his money, not for his status. For something far more intimate, far more irreversible. What she offered could save him. What she asked could destroy him. And somewhere between the crystal wine glasses and the floor-to-ceiling windows, Daniel realized he'd already made his choice before he even understood the question. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about family, power, and second chances. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through Daniel Cross's dream at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to. He'd been dreaming about Sarah again. In the dream, she was laughing in their old kitchen, flour on her nose from making pancakes, sunlight streaming through windows they'd spent a weekend painting together. Then the alarm pulled him back to reality. A cold bed, an empty house, and another day of being both mother and father to a 7-year-old boy who deserved so much more than Daniel felt capable of giving. He silenced the alarm and lay there for exactly 30 seconds, his daily allowance of weakness, before forcing himself upright. The house was quiet in that particular way that only single parents recognize. Not peaceful, not restful, just waiting for him to bring it to life, to fill it with the energy of two people when he barely had enough for one. Daniel's feet found the cold hardwood floor. October in Connecticut meant the heating bill would climb again, which meant he'd need to pick up another evening shift at the community college, where he taught introductory computer science. The adjunct pay was laughable, but it was steady. Steady mattered more than pride when you had a kid counting on you. He moved through his morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower, 5 minutes, no more. The water heater was original to the house, from before Sarah got sick, from before the medical bills, from before everything became about survival instead of living. Coffee, black, microwaved from yesterday's pot, because fresh grounds were a luxury reserved for weekends. Clothes, the same rotation of button-downs and khakis that made him invisible in faculty meetings and parent-teacher conferences alike. By 6:30, he was standing outside his son's bedroom door, steeling himself for the daily negotiation. "Ethan, buddy, time to get up." A groan from within. 5 more minutes. "That's what you said yesterday, and the day before. We both know how this ends. With you bribing me with chocolate chip pancakes?" Despite everything, despite the exhaustion, the loneliness, the constant weight of responsibility, Daniel smiled. "Nice try. It's a serial morning. But if you're dressed and ready in 20 minutes, I'll let you pick the music on the drive to school." That did it. Ethan appeared in the doorway, dark hair sticking up at impossible angles, wearing the same stubborn expression his mother used to wear when she was determined to win an argument. "Even if I want to listen to the Hamilton soundtrack for the millionth time." "Even then." "You're going to regret that, Dad." "Probably. But that's what dads are for, regretting things and pretending we planned them all along." Ethan grinned and shuffled toward the bathroom. Daniel listened to the familiar sounds, running water, toothbrush against sink, the kids' off-key humming, and felt the daily miracle of it. 3 years ago, when Sarah died, he wasn't sure either of them would make it through. The grief had been so enormous, so consuming, that basic functions felt impossible. Feeding Ethan, getting him to school, remembering to pay the electric bill. But they had made it. Day by impossible day, they had survived. The morning unfolded according to script. Cereal, the store brand that came in bags instead of boxes. Ethan's backpack check, homework, lunch money, the permission slip for the field trip Daniel had almost forgotten to sign. The familiar chaos of searching for a missing shoe, finding it under the couch, wondering how it got there in the first place. By 7:45, they were in Daniel's 12-year-old Honda, Hamilton blasting from speakers that had seen better days, Ethan singing every word with passionate inaccuracy. "You know," Daniel said, interrupting a particularly enthusiastic rendition of My Shot, "your mom used to sing like that." Ethan's voice dropped. "Really?" Terribly off-key, completely confident, absolutely joyful. You're exactly like her. The boy was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the suburban streets rolling past. Then softer. Do you think she'd be proud of us? Daniel's throat tightened. These moments still ambushed him, grief arriving unexpected and sharp, even after 3 years. Buddy, I think she'd be so proud of you that she'd probably cry. And then she'd make fun of my cooking and ask why I still can't figure out how to fold a fitted sheet. Nobody can fold fitted sheets, Dad. It's impossible. Your mother could. It was like a superpower. They pulled up to Riverside Elementary at 8:02, cutting it close, as always. Other parents were doing the same morning dance, hurried kisses, forgotten lunch boxes passed through windows, the controlled chaos of another school day beginning. Daniel watched Ethan hop out, backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. The kid turned back, habit from when he was younger and needed extra reassurance. Love you, Dad. Love you too, E. Have a good day. Learn something impressive. I'll try to learn something about pirates. That's pretty impressive. Pirates are always impressive. Then Ethan was gone, swallowed by the stream of children flowing toward the school entrance, and Daniel was alone again. He should have driven straight to campus. His first class wasn't until 10, but he had papers to grade, emails to answer, the endless administrative work that came with being the low man on the academic totem pole. Instead, he sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes, watching other parents drive away to jobs and lives he could only imagine. Most of them were couples, 2 people sharing the load, tag-teaming the responsibilities, having another adult to talk to at the end of a hard day. Daniel didn't resent them, exactly, but he felt the absence like a physical thing, a second chair at the dinner table that stayed empty, a side of the bed that never got warm, conversations with himself that used to be conversations with his best friend. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number with a New York area code. Daniel, this is Victoria Hale. I hope this message finds you well. I know it's been years since we last spoke, but I have something important to discuss with you. Would you be available to meet in New York this Friday evening? I'll send a car. It's not an emergency, but it is time sensitive. Please let me know. V. Daniel stared at the screen, certain he was misreading it. Victoria Hale. He hadn't heard that name in, 15 years? Maybe more. They'd grown up in the same small town in upstate New York, gone to the same schools, ran in the same circles back when circles were determined by whose parents would drive to the mall. She'd been brilliant even then, intense, driven, already talking about changing the world while everyone else was just trying to pass algebra. Then she'd left for MIT. He'd gone to a state school. Their paths had diverged the way paths do, and he'd followed her success the way everyone from their hometown did, through news articles and magazine covers, watching someone they used to know become someone everyone knew. Victoria Hale, tech prodigy, founder and CEO of Hale Technologies, billionaire before 35, featured on Time's cover, keynote speaker at conferences around the world. The kind of success story that seemed to belong to a different species, not someone he used to share cafeteria pizza with. And now she was texting him, asking to meet, calling it time sensitive. Daniel's first instinct was to assume it was a scam, but the number was real. He Googled it, found it listed on Hale Technologies' investor relations page. His second instinct was to assume it was a mistake, that she meant to text a different Daniel Cross. But she'd said his name, and she'd mentioned their past. He sat in his aging Honda, surrounded by the debris of single parenthood, empty juice boxes, scattered homework assignments, a child's sweatshirt in the back seat, and tried to imagine what Victoria Hale could possibly want from him. Nothing good, probably. People like her didn't reach out to people like him unless they needed something. A favor. A signature on something. Maybe she was doing some kind of charity thing, helping out people from the old neighborhood, and he'd been randomly selected for a pity scholarship or donation. The thought made him feel small and ashamed, which made him angry at himself for feeling ashamed. There was no shame in struggling, no shame in being a single parent, an adjunct professor barely making ends meet, a man whose greatest accomplishment was keeping his kid fed and loved and reasonably on time for school. But there was something about Victoria's message, the tone of it, the careful formality mixed with personal acknowledgement that suggested this wasn't about charity. It's not an emergency. but it is time-sensitive. What the hell did that mean? Before he could talk himself out of it, Daniel typed a response. Victoria, good to hear from you. Friday evening should work. What's this about? The reply came within 30 seconds. I'd prefer to explain in person. The car will pick you up at 5 p.m. Send me your address. And Daniel, thank you. He gave her the address, then sat back, a strange anxiety building in his chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. His morning class, Introduction to Programming, was the usual mix of eager freshmen and defeated seniors fulfilling a requirement. He lectured on loops and conditional statements, helped a student debug code that was missing a single semicolon, assigned homework that half the class wouldn't do. During his office hours, he sat in a cramped shared workspace and graded papers with one part of his brain while another part kept circling back to Victoria's message. I have something important to discuss with you. Important how? Important to whom? By the time he picked up Ethan from after-school care at 4:30, Daniel had convinced himself that this was some kind of networking thing. Maybe Victoria was expanding her company, looking to hire people for some new initiative, remembering that he'd been decent at computer science back in high school. It would be embarrassing her realizing he was just an adjunct, not some hotshot programmer, but survivable. Dad, you're being weird, Ethan announced from the back seat. What? No, I'm not. You're doing that thing where you're thinking too hard. Your face gets all scrunchy. My face doesn't get scrunchy. It totally does. Mom used to say it made you look like you were trying to solve world hunger with math. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror, caught Ethan's knowing grin. The kid was too perceptive for 7. I'm just thinking about work stuff. Boring. Extremely boring. How was your day? Learn anything about pirates? No, but I learned that Marcus Peterson eats glue. Like, on purpose. That's concerning. Mrs. Henderson said it's a phase. I think Marcus is just weird. They fell into comfortable conversation, the kind of meaningless, essential talk that filled the spaces between a parent and child. Ethan chattered about recess politics and the unfairness of timed math tests. Daniel made dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer, a concession to vegetables in the form of a bagged salad that Ethan picked at reluctantly. After dinner came homework, bath time, the nightly negotiation over how many books they could read before bed. Ethan lobbied for 3. They compromised on 2.5, which meant Daniel got to stop halfway through the third when the kid's eyes started drooping. Dad? Ethan's voice was sleepy, small in the dark room. Yeah, buddy. Are we okay? Like, money-wise? Daniel's heart clenched. We're fine. Why? I heard you on the phone with Grandma last week. You sounded worried. Damn. Daniel had thought Ethan was watching TV, not eavesdropping on a conversation about whether to dip into the emergency fund to fix the water heater. I wasn't worried, just talking through some grown-up stuff. You don't need to think about that. But I do think about it. I'm not dumb. You're definitely not dumb. You're the smartest kid I know. Daniel smoothed the hair off Ethan's forehead, the gesture automatic from years of repetition. And yeah, sometimes money is tight. But we always figure it out, don't we? We're a good team. The best team. Exactly. Now go to sleep. You've got a big day tomorrow of learning and hopefully not watching Marcus Peterson eat glue. Ethan giggled, burrowed deeper into his blankets. Okay. Love you, Dad. Love you too, E. More than all the pirates in all the oceans. That's a lot of pirates. That's how much? Daniel waited until Ethan's breathing evened out, then stood in the doorway for another minute, watching his son sleep. This was the moment every night when the enormity of it hit him. The responsibility, the privilege, the terrifying fragility of being someone's entire world. Then he went downstairs, cleaned up the kitchen, folded laundry while watching a documentary he wouldn't remember in the morning, and tried not to think about Friday. He failed. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel taught his classes, graded papers, attended a faculty meeting where they discussed budget cuts with the enthusiasm of people discussing their own execution. He helped Ethan with a diorama project about ecosystems that somehow required 3 trips to craft stores and resulted in glitter everywhere. He didn't tell anyone about Victoria's invitation. What would he even say? An old friend wants to meet in New York? It sounded ridiculous. It sounded like something that happened to other people, people whose lives included unexpected invitations and town cars and time-sensitive meetings with billionaires. Friday arrived. Daniel arranged for Ethan to stay overnight with his parents. They lived 40 minutes away and jumped at any chance to see their grandson. He told them he had a work thing in the city, which was technically not a lie if he was vague about what kind of work. At 4:45, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, second-guessing every clothing choice. Too casual? Too formal? Did it matter what he wore to meet someone who probably had a personal stylist in a closet larger than his entire house? He settled on dark jeans, a button-down shirt, his only sport coat that wasn't shiny at the elbows. The effect was community college professor trying very hard, but it was the best he could do. The car arrived exactly at 5. Not a taxi or Uber, but an actual Blacktown car with a driver in a suit who introduced himself as James and opened the door like Daniel was someone who deserved door opening. "Ms. Hale asked me to make sure you were comfortable," James said as they pulled away from the curb. "There's water, coffee, and snacks in the compartment to your right. The drive will be approximately 2 hours depending on traffic. Please let me know if you need anything." Daniel, who had been expecting maybe a nice Uber, stared at the leather interior and the privacy screen and the general opulence of it all. This is a lot. "Ms. Hale believes in making people comfortable. She said you're an old friend. We grew up together, but that was a long time ago. She spoke very highly of you, sir." That surprised Daniel more than the town car. Victoria had spoken about him? Remembered him enough to speak highly? They'd been friends, sure, but not close friends. Not the kind of friends who stayed in touch after geography and circumstance pulled them apart. The drive gave him too much time to think. He watched Connecticut suburbs give way to highway, highway give way to the outskirts of New York. The skyline rising like a promise or a threat, depending on your perspective. His phone buzzed. Text from his mother. "Ethan's doing great. We made cookies and he beat us both at Go Fish. Have a good meeting, honey. Love you." Attached was a photo of Ethan, chocolate smeared on his grin, giving a thumbs up. Daniel smiled, sent back a heart emoji, and felt the familiar guilt of being away from his son, mixed with the relief of knowing Ethan was safe and happy and loved by people who weren't him. By the time they reached Manhattan, Daniel's anxiety had crystallized into a tight knot in his chest. James navigated the evening traffic with practiced ease, finally pulling up to a building in Tribeca that was all glass and steel and architectural ambition. "We're here, sir. Miss Hale's penthouse. I'll wait to drive you home whenever you're ready." "You don't have to do that. I can take the train." James smiled kindly. "Miss Hale insists, sir. Take your time." The doorman knew he was expected. The elevator required a key card that the doorman provided. The ride to the top floor was smooth and silent, giving Daniel time to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Daniel stepped out and forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, light stretching to every horizon. The space was enormous, open concept, minimalist, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than his house. Furniture that looked sculptural and uncomfortable until you remembered that rich people could afford chairs that were both beautiful and functional. And standing by the windows, backlit by the city, was Victoria Hale. She turned, and Daniel was struck by how much she'd changed and how much she'd stayed the same. Older, obviously. They both were. 15 years would do that. But she carried herself differently now, with a confidence that went beyond teenage bravado. She wore black slacks and a silk blouse. No jewelry except a watch that probably cost 6 figures. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that was elegant without trying. "Daniel." Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. "Thank you for coming. Victoria, this is..." He gestured vaguely at everything. "A lot." "I suppose it is. Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Whiskey? I have a very patient man who stocks my bar with things I never drink, but apparently should have available for guests." "Water's fine." "Water it is. Come, sit. I promise the furniture is more comfortable than it looks." She was right. The couch was absurdly comfortable. Daniel sank into it, accepted a glass of water from her, and tried to process the surreality of the situation. Victoria sat across from him, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. I know this must seem strange. Calling you out of nowhere, asking you to come here. The thought crossed my mind. I'll try to explain, but I need you to understand something first. What I'm about to tell you is deeply personal. I'm trusting you with it because we have history, because I remember you as someone decent and honest, and because— She paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I need someone I can trust. Daniel set down his water glass, his anxiety ratcheting up several notches. Victoria, if you're in some kind of trouble, I'm not. Not the way you mean. She took a breath, and for the first time he saw a crack in her composure, uncertainty, maybe even fear. Daniel, I want to have a child, and I want you to be the father. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and clear. Daniel stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to laugh and say she was joking, for any of this to make sense. She didn't laugh. What? I know how it sounds. I know this is unexpected. Please, let me explain before you say anything. Daniel couldn't have spoken if he wanted to. His brain had stopped processing information in any useful way. Victoria stood, paced to the windows, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. When she spoke, her voice was measured, like she was presenting a business proposal, which Daniel realized with dawning horror, maybe she was. I'm 40 years old. I've spent the last 2 decades building a company, proving myself in rooms full of men who wanted to see me fail, making decisions that affected thousands of people. I've been successful by any metric you want to measure, but success came at a cost. She turned to face him, her expression vulnerable in a way that seemed alien on someone so composed. I don't have a partner. I don't have time for the kind of relationship that leads to marriage and children in the traditional sense. And I've dated enough to know that my money, my power, my public profile, they attract the wrong kind of attention. People want access. They want association. They want what I can give them, not who I actually am. Victoria, please, let me finish. She moved back to the couch, sat on the edge, her hands folded in her lap. I want a child. Not someday. Not if the right person comes along. Now. I want to be a mother. And I want to do it in a way that's honest and clear from the beginning. No illusions, no false promises, no pretending this is something it's not. Daniel found his voice, though it came out rough. You want me to— What, exactly? Donate sperm? More than that. I want you to be involved. I want the child to know their father, to have a relationship with you. But I also want to be clear about expectations. This isn't a proposal for marriage. It's not a romantic relationship. It's a partnership for the purpose of raising a child. She pulled out a folder from the side table, set it on the coffee table between them. I've had lawyers draw up an agreement. It's all in there. Financial support for you, for Ethan, for the child, medical coverage, educational trust funds. You would have visitation rights, parental input, everything a father should have. But we wouldn't be together in the traditional sense. We'd be co-parents, intentional co-parents. Daniel stared at the folder like it might explode. This is insane. I know it seems that way. No, Victoria, it is that way. You're asking me to father your child like it's a business arrangement, like we're forming an LLC instead of, creating a human being. Her composure cracked a little more. I'm asking you because I trust you, because I remember who you were, who you are. Kind, decent, a good father. I followed your life, Daniel, not in a creepy way, and she added quickly, seeing his expression. But we have mutual connections. I know about Sarah. I know you're raising Ethan alone. I know you're struggling financially, and I know that despite all of that, you're doing an incredible job. You've been checking up on me? I've been thinking about this for 2 years, researching options, considering possibilities, and I kept coming back to you. Daniel stood abruptly, needing to move, needing space to think. He walked to the windows, looked out at the city, at millions of people living millions of lives that made sense in ways his suddenly didn't. I can't believe I'm even considering this conversation, he said to his reflection. I should leave. I should walk out of here and pretend this never happened. But you're not walking out. He turned to look at her. She was watching him with an intensity that reminded him of the girl she'd been, the one who tackled every problem like a puzzle that just needed the right solution. Why me? He asked. Really, you could have anyone. You could go to a sperm bank, find some Ivy League donor with perfect genetics. You could hire a surrogate, adopt, do any number of things that don't involve asking an old acquaintance to upend his entire life. Victoria stood, moved closer, but not too close, respecting his space. Because I don't want perfect genetics from a catalog. I don't want a stranger's child. She struggled for the words. I want to know where they come from, who they come from. I want my child to have a father who chose to be their father, not someone who donated for money or obligation. And yes, I could do this alone entirely, but I don't think that's fair to the child. They deserve both parents if both parents can be present. And you think I can be present? I live 2 hours away. I have a job, a son, a life that barely holds together as it is. Which is why I'm offering support, not charity, partnership. You could teach remotely, or I could fund a position at a university closer to the city. Ethan could have opportunities that... She stopped herself. I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to make this possible for both of us. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you hear yourself? You're trying to engineer a child like it's a project, like you can control all the variables and optimize the outcome. Maybe I am. Her voice was quiet. Maybe that's all I know how to do. But I'm being honest about it. I'm not pretending this is a fairy tale. I'm offering you a choice with full information and the freedom to say no. And if I say no, then I'll thank you for coming, send you home, and figure out another path. I won't be angry. I won't think less of you. I'll just understand that I was asking too much. They stood there, two people separated by 15 years and vastly different lives, connected by a request that seemed to violate every natural law of how families were supposed to form. Daniel thought about Ethan, about the water heater that needed replacing, the medical bills still outstanding from Sarah's final months, the endless calculations of whether they could afford new shoes or if last year's would stretch one more season. He thought about Sarah, about the family they'd been building before cancer stole her away, about the plans they'd had, the second child they'd talked about having once Ethan was older, the life that had disappeared like morning mist. And he thought about the woman standing in front of him, powerful and vulnerable at the same time, asking for something impossible while offering everything he needed. I can't answer this tonight, he finally said. Victoria nodded, like she'd expected this. Of course. Take the folder, read it, think about it. Talk to a lawyer if you want. I'll pay for it. This is too big a decision to make quickly. How long do I have? As long as you need, but... She hesitated. I'm not getting younger, neither of us is. So while I won't pressure you, I also can't wait indefinitely. Daniel picked up the folder, heavy with implications and legal language. I should go. James will drive you home. And Daniel? She walked him to the elevator, pressed the button. Whatever you decide, thank you for listening, for not walking out, for taking me seriously. The elevator arrived. Daniel stepped in, turned to face her. I remember you in high school, he said suddenly. You were always so certain about everything, like you could see the future and just had to wait for everyone else to catch up. It drove me crazy. She smiled, sad and knowing. I'm not certain about this. That's why I need someone I can trust. Someone who'll be honest when I'm wrong. The doors closed on her expression, hope and fear and something that might have been loneliness. Daniel rode down in silence, emerged into the New York night, climbed into the town car where James waited patiently. Home, sir? Yeah, home. The drive back was longer than 2 hours. Daniel sat in the back seat, folder unopened in his lap, watching the city recede into suburbs into familiar Connecticut streets. He thought about Victoria's penthouse and his rental house, about her certainty and his constant scrambling, about the child she wanted and the child he already had, about how sometimes the most impossible choices were the ones that made the most sense. When James finally pulled up to his house at nearly 11 p.m., Daniel thanked him and went inside to an empty, quiet space that had never felt emptier or quieter. He set the folder on the kitchen table, made himself tea, and finally opened it. The legal language was dense, but the intent was clear. Financial security for both children, health care, education, custody arrangements that were generous and flexible. No requirement for marriage, but no prohibition against future relationship development either. It was thorough, carefully considered, designed to protect everyone involved. It was exactly what Victoria had said it would be. An honest proposal with no illusions. Daniel read until his eyes burned, until the words started to blur together. Then he closed the folder, put his head in his hands, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do. His phone buzzed. Message from his mother. Ethan's asleep. He had a wonderful time. See you tomorrow. Everything okay with your meeting? Daniel stared at the question, at the blinking cursor waiting for his response. Was everything okay? He had no idea. Everything's fine. See you in the morning. Thanks for watching him. He sent the text, turned off his phone, and sat in his quiet kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary debris of ordinary life. Ethan's artwork on the fridge, dishes in the sink, a calendar marked with soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences, and all the small obligations that made up their world. And on the table in front of him, a folder that could change everything. Daniel Cross had learned how to survive on routine, on responsibility, on being enough for two people when he barely felt like one. But survival wasn't the same as living, and for the first time in 3 years, someone was offering him a chance at something more. He just had no idea if accepting would save him or destroy everything he'd worked so hard to build. The night stretched on, full of questions he couldn't answer and choices he wasn't ready to make. But morning would come regardless. It always did. And somehow, he'd have to decide what came next. Morning came with the weight of impossible decisions still pressing against Daniel's chest. He'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, his mind cycling endlessly through scenarios, consequences, all the ways this could go wrong. The folder still sat on his kitchen table where he'd left it, an inert object that somehow felt like it was breathing, waiting, demanding a response he wasn't ready to give. He picked up Ethan at 10, his mother giving him a searching look that said she knew something was off but wouldn't push. Not yet, anyway. Good meeting? She asked at the door while Ethan gathered his overnight bag. Complicated, Daniel said, which was perhaps the most honest answer he could manage. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. Not much. She touched his arm, her hand warm and familiar. Whatever it is, honey, you'll figure it out. You always do. If only she knew what she was saying. If only he had her confidence. The weekend passed in a fog of normalcy that felt surreal. He made pancakes for Ethan on Saturday morning, helped with homework, took him to soccer practice where he stood on the sidelines with other parents and pretended to care about second-grade athletics when his brain was thousands of miles away. Sunday meant grocery shopping, meal prep for the week, the ordinary rituals of single parenthood that usually grounded him but now felt like they were happening to someone else. He didn't open the folder again. Didn't need to. The details were burned into his memory, each clause and provision a small detonation in his understanding of what his life could become. Financial security. That's what Victoria was offering, though she'd been careful not to frame it that way. But that's what it was. An end to the constant calculations. The midnight panic about unexpected expenses. The grinding awareness that one major crisis could destroy everything he'd built for Ethan, and more than that, a second child. A sibling for Ethan, something Daniel had always wanted to give him but had resigned himself to being impossible. How could he date, much less remarry, when he barely had time to sleep? When the thought of opening himself up to that kind of vulnerability again made his chest tight with remembered grief. But this wasn't dating. This wasn't vulnerability in the traditional sense. This was a transaction, a carefully negotiated agreement between two adults who wanted the same thing for completely different reasons. Except every time Daniel tried to think of it that way, tried to approach it with the clinical detachment Victoria seemed to possess, he couldn't quite manage it. Because this wasn't about contracts and provisions. This was about a child. A human being who would exist, who would have feelings and questions and needs that couldn't be anticipated in legal language. What would he tell that child when they asked how they came to be? That daddy needed money and mommy needed sperm, and they worked out a deal that benefited everyone? The thought made him sick. Monday brought relief in the form of routine. Classes to teach, students to help, the familiar rhythms of academic life that required just enough attention to quiet the chaos in his head. He was explaining recursion to a classroom of glazed-eyed freshmen when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, checked it between classes. Victoria. I don't mean to pressure you, but I wanted to let you know I'm available if you have questions. About anything in the agreement, or about me, or about how I envision this working. I realize I probably overwhelmed you Friday night. That wasn't my intention. V. Daniels stared at the message, at the careful formality mixed with something that might have been nervousness. Victoria Hale, billionaire tech mogul, nervous about his response. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't terrifying. He typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, I'm still processing, need some time to think. Will reach out when I'm ready. Her response was immediate. Of course, take all the time you need. But time didn't help. Tuesday felt exactly like Monday. Wednesday brought a parent-teacher conference where Ethan's teacher praised his creativity and gently suggested he needed to focus more on math facts. Thursday meant another evening of helping with homework while his mind wandered to New York penthouses and impossible choices. By Friday, Daniel knew he needed to talk to someone. Not his parents. They'd either be horrified or overly encouraging, and he couldn't handle either reaction. Not his colleagues. This wasn't water cooler conversation material. That left exactly one person who might understand the complexity without judgment. Marcus Chen had been Daniel's roommate in college, his best man at his wedding, the friend who'd shown up every single week after Sarah died with takeout and patience and no expectations. He'd moved to Boston for work, but they still talked regularly, their friendship weathered by time and distance into something essential. Daniel called him that night after Ethan was asleep. This better be good, Marcus answered. I'm watching a very important basketball game that my wife insists isn't actually important. I need advice. Marcus's tone shifted immediately. What's wrong? Is Ethan okay? Ethan's fine. I got an offer. A strange one. I need someone to tell me if I'm crazy for even considering it. Okay, you've got my attention. Hold on. Muffled sounds of Marcus moving to another room, a door closing. All right, I'm in my office. Julia knows this means either something seriously wrong or seriously weird. Hit me. Daniel took a breath and told him everything. Victoria's invitation, the penthouse meeting, the proposal that wasn't a proposal, the folder full of legal promises and impossible futures. He laid it all out in careful detail, trying to be objective, trying to present it as a problem to be solved rather than a choice that was tearing him apart. Marcus was quiet for a long moment after Daniel finished. You still there? Daniel asked. Yeah, I'm here. Just trying to process the fact that you got asked to be a billionaire's baby daddy and didn't lead with that information. This isn't funny. It's a little funny. I mean, it's also insane and complicated and ethically ambiguous, but it's definitely funny. Marcus paused. Okay, serious mode. What does the lawyer say? I haven't talked to a lawyer. Daniel, come on. First rule of anything involving billionaires and contracts. Talk to a lawyer. Victoria offered to pay for one. That's actually decent of her. Okay, so what's stopping you from at least getting legal advice? Daniel walked to his living room window, looked out at his quiet street, at houses full of normal families living normal lives. Because if I talk to a lawyer, that means I'm seriously considering this. And if I'm seriously considering this, then I have to actually think about what it means. Not just the money or the security, but the reality of it. Creating a child with someone I barely know, bringing another kid into this mess, explaining to Ethan that he's going to have a sibling who lives somewhere else with a mother who's basically a stranger. But you are considering it. It wasn't a question. I can't stop thinking about it, Daniel admitted. Every time I try to dismiss it as crazy, I start calculating what that money could mean. A house that doesn't need constant repairs. Ethan's college fund actually funded. Time. Marcus, I could have time. Time to be with my kid instead of constantly scrambling to make ends meet. Those are good reasons. They're selfish reasons. They're practical reasons. And Daniel, man, you've been drowning for 3 years. I've watched you barely keep your head above water, refusing help, killing yourself to be everything for Ethan. If someone's offering you a life preserver, maybe you should think about grabbing it. But what about the kid? Victoria's kid? What kind of father would I be if I agreed to this for the money? Marcus was quiet again, thinking. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. What kind of father would you be if you didn't consider every opportunity to provide better for your family? Look, I'm not saying this is simple. It's the opposite of simple. But Victoria's not asking you to abandon this kid. She's asking you to be their father. That's what you already know how to do. It's not the same. No, it's not. It's different circumstances. But the core thing, being present, being honest, being loving, that doesn't change based on how the kid was conceived or what the custody arrangement looks like. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of guilt he'd been carrying since Friday night. You think I should do it? I think you should talk to a lawyer. I think you should ask Victoria more questions. I think you should figure out if this could actually work before you decide it can't. And Daniel? I think you should stop punishing yourself for even considering it. You're not a bad person for wanting your life to be easier. You're human. After they hung up, Daniel sat with those words. You're human. Such a simple statement, but it cut through all the complicated reasoning and moral calculations to something fundamental. He was human, he was tired, he was struggling, and someone was offering him a way forward that terrified him precisely because it could actually work. Saturday morning, he called Victoria. She answered on the second ring. Daniel? I have questions. A lot of them. I'm glad. Do you want to meet again? Or we could talk now, if that's easier. Now is good. Ethan's at a birthday party. I have about 2 hours. Then let's use them. What do you want to know? Daniel had made a list, scrawled across 3 pages in his messy handwriting. He looked at the first item. Why now? You're 40, successful. You could wait a few more years. Why is this urgent? Victoria's sigh came through the phone, weary and honest. Because I've been telling myself a few more years since I was 35. There's always another product launch, another acquisition, another reason to wait until things are less chaotic. But my life doesn't get less chaotic. It gets more complicated, and my fertility doesn't wait for my schedule to clear. Have you tried dating? I mean, really tried? I've tried everything. Dating apps where people recognize my name and suddenly become very interested in my investment portfolio. Setups through friends that feel like job interviews. Relationships that start promising and end the moment I prioritize a board meeting over a dinner reservation. Her voice hardened slightly. I'm not naive about this, Daniel. I know that my success intimidates some people and attracts the wrong kind of attention from others. Finding someone who wants me, not my money or my connections, would require years I don't have. So I'm the consolation prize. You're the honest choice. There's a difference. Daniel moved to the next question. What happens if I meet someone? If I want to get married again someday? Then I'd be happy for you. The agreement doesn't prevent you from having relationships or even other children. It just clarifies that this child, our child, remains a priority. We'd have to coordinate custody, of course, and any partner you choose would need to understand the situation. But I'm not asking you to be celibate for the next 18 years. And if you meet someone? Same answer. Though honestly, I'm less optimistic about that possibility. There was something sad in her voice, a loneliness Daniel recognized because he felt it every day. How would this actually work, he asked. The logistics? You're in New York, I'm in Connecticut. Are you expecting me to move? Not necessarily. 2 hours isn't impossible for co-parenting, but I'd want you to be involved, not just weekend visits, but real parenting. Decisions about schools, healthcare, discipline. I don't want to be a single mother with a sperm donor who sends birthday cards. I want a partner in this. But not a romantic partner. No, not a romantic partner. She paused. Unless that evolved naturally, which I'm not expecting or requiring. This is about being co-parents first. Anything else would have to develop organically, without expectation. Daniel's heart kicked up at that, at the acknowledgement that this arrangement could become something more. That scared him more than the arrangement itself. What do I tell Ethan? The question came out rough. How do I explain this to my 7-year-old son? Age appropriately and honestly, that you're helping someone become a mother, that he's going to have a sibling who he'll get to know and love, Kids are more adaptable than we give them credit for, especially when the adults in their lives are stable and truthful. And when the kid asks why their parents aren't together, we tell them the truth, that we chose to be parents together, that we both wanted them very much, and that families come in all different shapes. Daniel, I grew up with divorced parents who hated each other. This would be better than that. We're starting from a place of respect and clear expectations. No bitter divorce, no broken promises, no lies. She had an answer for everything. Daniel didn't know if that reassured him or frightened him. The money, he said. I need to be clear about this. I'm not doing this for the money. I know. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't matter, that it isn't a huge factor in me even considering this. I'd be worried if it wasn't. Financial stress destroys people, Daniel. It destroyed my parents' marriage. If I can remove that stress from your life while also getting what I want, why wouldn't I? Because it feels like you're buying me. I'm not buying you. I'm investing in our child's future, in both our children's futures. Ethan deserves stability too. Is it wrong that I want to provide that? Put that way, it was harder to argue. Daniel looked at his list, at question after question that Victoria answered with calm rationality. About medical decisions, about education, about holidays and custody schedules and how to handle the inevitable public attention if their arrangement became known. She'd thought of everything, planned for contingencies he hadn't even considered. It should have been comforting. Instead, it highlighted the vast gulf between them, her world of calculated risks and contingency plans, his world of barely controlled chaos and day-to-day survival. I feel like I'm in over my head, he said finally. You are. We both are. Nobody has a manual for this. Victoria's voice softened. Daniel, I'm scared too. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't balance work and parenting the way I think I can? What if this child resents being born from an arrangement instead of a relationship? I have all the same fears you do. I'm just trying to face them with a plan instead of letting them paralyze me. That honesty, that glimpse of the woman beneath the billionaire facade, shifted something in Daniel. This wasn't some cold business transaction to her. She was as terrified as he was, just better at hiding it. I need to talk to Ethan, he said. Not about all of it, but I need to see how he'd feel about having a sibling. That's reasonable? Will you tell him about me? I don't know yet. Maybe just the hypothetical first. Whatever you think is best, you know him. I trust your judgment. Those words, I trust your judgment, landed with unexpected weight. When was the last time someone had said that to him? When was the last time someone had trusted him with something important instead of just tolerating his constant struggle? I'll call you next week, Daniel said, after I've had time to think about all this. Thank you for taking this seriously, for not just dismissing it outright. Yeah, well, I'm either considering the opportunity of a lifetime or the biggest mistake I could possibly make. Still figuring out which. If it helps, I'm betting on opportunity. You would. You're the one with all the answers. Victoria laughed, and it sounded younger, less polished. I wish. Mostly I'm making very expensive guesses and hoping they work out. After they hung up, Daniel sat in his quiet house and tried to imagine it. Telling Ethan, accepting Victoria's offer, becoming a father for the second time under the strangest circumstances possible. Navigating co-parenting with a woman who lived in a different world, raising a child who would grow up between two completely different lives. It should have seemed impossible. But somewhere in all those conversations, all those carefully worded clauses and honest admissions, it had started to seem almost reasonable. That night, after Ethan came home exhausted and happy from the birthday party, sticky with cake and full of stories about bounce houses and piñatas, Daniel lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. Sarah's side of the bed was still empty. It had been empty for 3 years, and he'd convinced himself it always would be. That chapter of his life was over. Romance, partnership, the kind of intimacy that came from building a life with someone. Those were casualties of grief and responsibility. But Victoria wasn't offering romance. She was offering partnership of a different kind. A family built on honesty instead of illusion. A future that acknowledged the past without being trapped by it. Daniel fell asleep still undecided. His dreams a confusion of penthouse windows and suburban kitchens, of children's laughter and impossible choices. Sunday morning, he made pancakes. It was their ritual. Saturday was cereal, Sunday was pancakes, and neither of them ever questioned it. Ethan appeared in the kitchen, still half asleep, his hair doing that thing where it stuck straight up on one side, his mother's eyes blinking slowly in his father's face. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always, buddy." "Do you ever get lonely?" Daniel's spatula froze mid-flip. "Where'd that come from?" Ethan shrugged, climbing onto his usual stool at the counter. "Marcus's mom is getting married again. He was talking about it at the party. Said he's getting a stepdad. And I was thinking, do you ever want to get married again?" Of all the conversations Daniel had been preparing for, this wasn't one of them. That's a big question for a Sunday morning. You always say we can talk about big things. You're right. I did say that. Daniel plated the pancakes, buying time. Sat down across from Ethan. "Yeah, buddy. Sometimes I get lonely. Being a grown-up without another grown-up to talk to can be hard." "Do you miss Mom?" "Every single day." "Me too." Ethan poured syrup with the careful concentration of a 7-year-old trying to be independent. "Would it be weird if you got married again? Like, would that mean you didn't love Mom anymore?" Daniel's throat tightened. "No, E. Love doesn't work like that. I'll always love your mom. She'll always be important to us. But loving someone new wouldn't take that away. It would just be different love. Both can be real." "Oh." Ethan chewed thoughtfully. "Okay, that makes sense, I guess." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Daniel took a breath and decided to test the waters. "What would you think about having a brother or sister someday?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? Are you getting married?" No, I'm just asking hypothetically. Like, if there was a possibility, how would you feel about it?" "I think it would be cool. Marcus has a little sister and she's annoying, but he says he likes her. And Tommy has 3 brothers and they play video games together." Ethan considered this seriously. "Would they live with us?" "Probably not all the time. It's complicated." "Because of divorce?" "Something like that." "But they'd still be my real sibling? Like, for real?" "Yeah, buddy. For real." Ethan grinned, syrup on his chin. "Then I think it would be awesome. I could teach them stuff. And we could have adventures together when they visit." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. Relief, terror, hope, all mixed together. His son, resilient and open-hearted in the way only children could be, had just given permission for something Daniel hadn't even fully decided to do. "That's good to know," Daniel said softly. "Thanks for telling me. Can we get a dog too?" "Don't push your luck." The moment passed, Ethan moving on to other pressing concerns about whether they could go to the park later. But Daniel sat with what had just happened. His son wanted a sibling, was ready for one. Would welcome the complication Daniel had been so worried about. Maybe kids really were more adaptable than adults gave them credit for. That afternoon, while Ethan was absorbed in building an elaborate Lego city, Daniel opened the folder again. Read through it with new eyes, not looking for reasons to say no, but testing whether he could actually say yes. The numbers were staggering. Victoria was offering him security he'd never imagined. Not just for himself, but for Ethan. College tuition, fully funded. A trust that would ensure his son's future, regardless of what happened to Daniel. Medical coverage that would mean never again lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if he could afford a necessary prescription. But beyond the money, there were other provisions. Daniel would have equal say in major decisions. The child would know both parents. Victoria wasn't trying to buy his compliance. She was trying to build something real. He thought about Marcus's words. "You're not a bad person for wanting your life to be easier." He thought about Victoria's voice on the phone. "I'm scared too." He thought about Ethan's simple acceptance. "I think it would be awesome." And he thought about Sarah, about what she would have said if she were here. She'd always been this brave one, the one who leapt while Daniel calculated. She would have seen through to the heart of this. 2 people trying to do right by a child who didn't exist yet. She would have asked him what he wanted, not what he should want. What did he want? He wanted to stop struggling. He wanted to give Ethan more than survival. He wanted to be part of something again, even if it wasn't traditional. He wanted to believe that his life could include more than just maintaining the status quo until his son was old enough to leave. And somewhere underneath all of that, buried beneath years of grief and responsibility, he wanted to believe that Victoria was right, that families came in all shapes, that this could work. Daniel picked up his phone, typed a message. I want to move forward, carefully, but I want to try. Can we meet again next Friday? Bring the lawyers. Let's make sure we're really doing this right. Victoria's response came within minutes. Yes, I'll arrange everything. Thank you, Daniel, for trusting me with this. He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed one more thing. I'm not doing this for the money. I need you to understand that. I'm doing this because I think we could be good parents together, and because my son deserves a sibling, and because maybe you're right about families coming in different shapes. I understand, and I believe you. We'll figure this out together. Daniel set down the phone, his hands shaking slightly. He'd just agreed to something that would change his life completely. There was no going back from this moment, no pretending it was just a hypothetical consideration. He was going to be a father again, with a woman he barely knew, under circumstances that would sound insane to anyone he tried to explain them to. And somehow, despite all of that, it felt like the right choice. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a Lego spaceship. Dad, you okay? You look weird again. Daniel looked at his son, his brave, adaptable, incredible son, and smiled. Yeah, I'm okay. Actually, I think I might be better than okay. Cool. Can we go to the park now? Yeah, buddy, let's go to the park. They spent the afternoon in familiar territory, Ethan racing around the playground while Daniel sat on a bench and watched. Other families surrounded them. Married couples watching toddlers on swings, single parents chasing kids up slides, the whole messy tapestry of modern family life in all its variations. His family was about to get more complicated, more unusual. But watching Ethan play, seeing him laugh and run and exist in the uncomplicated joy of childhood, Daniel thought maybe that was okay. Maybe unusual didn't mean wrong. Maybe complicated could still be good. The sun was setting when they finally headed home, Ethan's hand in his, talking about nothing and everything. Daniel listened with half his attention while the other half spun out into the future, trying to imagine what came next. There would be lawyers, negotiations, medical appointments. There would be telling his parents, facing their questions and concerns. There would be 9 months of preparation, of figuring out how to explain this to everyone from Ethan's teachers to his own colleagues. And at the end of it, there would be a baby, a child who would call him Dad, a sibling for Ethan, a family that didn't look like anyone's idea of normal, but could still be whole. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and wrote an email to Victoria. Not about logistics or legal details, but about what mattered. I need you to know something. This isn't going to be easy. We're going to disagree about things. You're going to think I'm too cautious, and I'm going to think you're too controlling. We come from completely different worlds, and that's not going to magically change because we're having a child together. But I promise you this, I will show up. I will be honest. I will put this kid first, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. I will be the father they deserve, not because a contract says so, but because that's who I am. I need the same promise from you. Not perfection, we're both going to mess this up sometimes, but commitment. Real commitment to making this work, whatever that looks like. If you can promise me that, then let's do this. Let's build something that doesn't have a name yet. Let's prove that family is what you make it. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Victoria's response came an hour later. I promise, all of it. We'll figure this out together. See you Friday. Daniel closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Sarah's picture still sat on the nightstand, her smile frozen in happier times. I hope I'm doing the right thing, he whispered to the photograph. I hope you'd understand. The picture, of course, didn't answer, but somehow, in the quiet of his room, Daniel felt something like peace. This was terrifying and strange and nothing like he'd planned. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. The second meeting happened in a conference room instead of Victoria's penthouse, which somehow made it feel more real and more terrifying. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, was shown to a 20th floor office by an assistant who offered him coffee he was too nervous to drink. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long mahogany table, and the kind of leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Victoria arrived exactly on time, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they billed by the minute. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost what Daniel spent on groceries in 6 months. Her hair pulled back, every inch the CEO, except for the moment their eyes met, and he saw genuine nervousness there. "Daniel, thank you for coming. This is Rebecca Chen, my personal attorney, and David Morrison, who specializes in family law." She gestured to the chairs. "Please sit." I asked them to walk us through everything so we both understand exactly what we're agreeing to. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in legal precision. Rebecca laid out the financial arrangements with the clinical efficiency of someone who negotiated billion-dollar deals: trust funds, medical coverage, education provisions, life insurance policies that made Daniel's head spin. David explained custody schedules, decision-making protocols, what would happen in various scenarios they both hoped would never occur. Daniel had brought his own lawyer. Marcus had insisted, had even recommended someone. And Tom Breslin sat beside him, occasionally interrupting to clarify a point or suggest a modification. He was a rumpled man in his 50s who specialized in family law and had promised Daniel he'd seen stranger arrangements than this. Though not by much, Tom had admitted on the phone. The conversation stayed professional until Rebecca pulled out a document labeled Conception Agreement. Daniel felt his face heat. "I'm sorry, what?" Victoria cleared her throat. "We need to be clear about how this happens. There are medical options. Artificial insemination, IVF, or..." She paused, and for the first time that afternoon, her composure cracked slightly. "Or the traditional method. Both have legal implications. Both require consent and clear understanding." The room went very quiet. Tom leaned over. "This is standard for these arrangements. You need to specify the method for liability purposes and to establish paternity clearly." "Right." Daniel looked at Victoria, who was studying the table with intense focus. "What do you want?" "I think that's a conversation we should have privately," she said quietly. "Not with 4 lawyers listening." Rebecca checked her watch. "We can take a break. Give you two some time to discuss the personal elements while we review the financial provisions." The lawyers filed out with the smooth efficiency of people who'd orchestrated much more awkward conversations. Daniel and Victoria sat across from each other, the city stretching out behind her, the silence between them heavy with implication. "This is weird," Daniel said finally. "Extremely weird." Victoria managed a small smile. "I've negotiated mergers and acquisitions in rooms like this. Somehow this feels infinitely more complicated." "Because it is. We're not talking about companies. We're talking about creating a life together." "Yes." She folded her hands on the table, her posture perfect even now. "The clinical methods would be simpler, less emotionally complicated. But they're expensive, uncertain, and they still require multiple appointments, hormone treatments, medical intervention, and there's no guarantee of success." She met his eyes. "The traditional method has a higher success rate. It's also free, which isn't the point, but it matters." Daniel laughed, more from nerves than humor. "Are we really having this conversation?" "We're having all the conversations. That was the deal, complete honesty." Victoria's fingers drummed once on the table, a rare sign of agitation. "I'm 40 years old. My fertility isn't what it was at 30. Every month matters. If we're doing this, I want the best possible chance of it working." "So you want..." Daniel couldn't quite say it. "I want us to try the traditional way first. If it doesn't work after a reasonable time frame, we can explore medical options." She paused. "But I need to know if that's something you're comfortable with." "This only works if we're both fully consenting." The question hung between them. Daniel thought about the clinical alternative, appointments, procedures, the sterile removal of anything human from the process. Then he thought about the other option, which wasn't sterile at all and came with its own massive complications. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we need ground rules. This isn't a relationship. It's not romance. It's..." "Practical," Victoria supplied. "Intentional. A means to an end that we both want." "Exactly. So we keep it separate from everything else. No expectations beyond the immediate goal. No confusion about what this means." "Agreed." Clear boundaries, clear communication, clear purpose. They sat with that for a moment. Then Daniel asked the question that had been bothering him since Friday. Have you done this before? The whole arrangement thing? No. You? Obviously not. So we're both figuring this out as we go. It appears so? Victoria's smile was rueful. I usually have more data before making major decisions. Yeah, well, I usually have dinner before sleeping with someone. That startled a laugh out of her, genuine and unexpected. Fair point. Though technically, we will have had dinner. Last week counts. That was a business meeting with appetizers, doesn't count. You're very particular about your definitions. I'm particular about everything. Ask anyone who knows me. I'm the guy who color codes his son's homework folders and alphabetizes the spice rack. I organize my closet by color and fabric weight, Victoria admitted, and my books are sorted by publication date within genre categories. That's excessive, says the man who color codes homework folders. They were smiling now, the tension breaking slightly. This was still insane, still wildly inappropriate for a business meeting, but it was also somehow becoming real. They were two people trying to navigate impossible territory with honesty and humor, which was more than most couples managed. The lawyers returned after 30 minutes. Daniel and Victoria had reached their private agreement, though Daniel's face still heated when they confirmed they'd be attempting conception through natural means, which was apparently the legal phrase for what normal people just called sex. Rebecca added another clause to the document. David made notes. Tom gave Daniel a look that was part concern, part respect, part this is your life now acceptance. By the time they finished, it was after 7. The lawyers packed up their briefcases, promised to have final documents ready within a week, and departed with handshakes and business cards. Daniel and Victoria stood alone in the conference room, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. That was the most professionally awkward conversation I've ever had, Daniel said. Same. And I once had to fire a board member during Thanksgiving dinner. Why during Thanksgiving? He was embezzling. It couldn't wait. She shrugged. Family business is complicated. Apparently all business is complicated when you're involved. Victoria moved to the windows, her reflection ghostly against the glass. Are you having second thoughts? It's okay if you are. This is a lot. Daniel joined her, their reflections standing side by side, two people who barely knew each other planning something impossibly intimate. I'm terrified, but no, I'm not having second thoughts. You? Same. Terrified and committed. She turned to face him directly. When do you want to start? The question was clinical, but the implications weren't. Daniel's mouth went dry. I guess we need to figure out timing, how this actually works logistically. I've been tracking my cycle. I'm most fertile in about 10 days. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was scheduling a board meeting. If you're available, we could start then. Start. Right. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. This is really happening. Only if you still want it to. He looked at her. This brilliant, powerful, lonely woman who was trusting him with something she couldn't control or plan or purchase. Who was asking him to help her build a family in the most unconventional way possible. Who saw him not as a charity case, but as a partner. I want it to, he said. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the reality of it. Me too. Victoria's professional mask slipped slightly. I've spent months planning this, but now that it's actually happening, I keep wondering if I'm making a huge mistake. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I can't balance everything? What if this child needs more than I can give? Then you figure it out. That's what parenting is. Constant improvisation with really high stakes. Daniel smiled slightly. And you won't be doing it alone. That's the whole point of this, right? We're in it together. Together. She tested the word. I'm not used to together. I'm used to handling everything myself. Yeah, I got that impression. But you're going to have to get used to it, because I'm not just a sperm donor with visitation rights. I'm going to be this kid's father. That means midnight feedings and diaper changes and opinions about preschools. You ready for that? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They stood there, two people on the edge of something that would change everything, still not quite believing they were going through with it. Victoria cleared her throat. I should probably feed you since you have opinions about dinner before. Yeah, food would be good. They went to a quiet restaurant in Tribeca, the kind of place where the menu had no prices and the waiters moved like ghosts. Daniel felt massively out of place in his department store blazer, but Victoria seemed not to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. Over wine Daniel couldn't pronounce and food he couldn't identify. They talked. Not about lawyers or logistics, but about themselves. Victoria told him about growing up poor in upstate New York, about a father who drank and a mother who worked 3 jobs, about being the smart kid, the scholarship kid, the one who got out and then spent years feeling guilty for leaving. "Everyone from home thinks I'm lucky," she said, swirling her wine. "They see the money and the success and think it just happened. They don't see the 80-hour weeks, the relationships that failed because I prioritized work, the constant pressure to prove I deserve to be here." Sounds lonely. It is. That's why, she gestured vaguely. This, you, a child who'll know me before I became this version of myself, someone who might see past the billionaire CEO to just mom. Daniel thought about his own loneliness, the empty bed and quiet house, and constant ache of doing everything alone. I get it. Different circumstances, same isolation. That's why I chose you. Not just because I trust you, but because I think you understand what it's like to want connection without complication. To need family without the pressure of romance. Is that what this is? Family without romance? I don't know what this is. We're making it up as we go. Victoria met his eyes. Does that bother you? Terrifies me, but also kind of excites me. There's freedom in not having a blueprint. They talked until the restaurant started emptying, until the waiters were politely hovering with the check. Daniel insisted on splitting it, knowing it was ridiculous given their financial disparity, but needing to maintain some dignity. Victoria let him, which he appreciated more than she probably knew. Outside, the November air was sharp. Victoria's driver appeared with the town car, but she waved him off. "Walk with me?" They walked through Tribeca's quiet streets, past converted warehouses and expensive boutiques, not touching, but somehow together. The city hummed around them, millions of people living millions of lives, and somewhere in that vast complexity, they were about to add one more. 10 days, Victoria said finally. That's when we'd need to try. You'd stay at my place, multiple days probably, to maximize chances. Right. Multiple days. Daniel tried to process that. I'll need to arrange care for Ethan, maybe with my parents. Whatever you need. And Daniel, when we do this, I want it to be comfortable. Not romantic, but not clinical either. We're friends doing something unusual together. That's all it has to be. Friends. The word felt both inadequate and exactly right. Okay. Friends. They reached the curb where James waited patiently. Victoria turned to face him, and in the streetlight she looked younger, less certain, more human than the CEO who'd commanded the conference room. Thank you, she said quietly, for saying yes, for trusting this. Thank you for asking, for seeing me as more than just a struggling single dad. I see exactly who you are. That's why I asked. The drive home took forever. Daniel sat in the back of the town car, watching Connecticut roll past, his mind spinning. In 10 days, he'd return to New York. He'd stay in Victoria's penthouse. They'd attempt to conceive a child with the same intentionality most people brought to business ventures. And if it worked, everything would change. He thought about how to tell his parents, what to say to Ethan when the time came, how to explain this to anyone who asked. But mostly he thought about Victoria, the way she'd admitted her fears, the loneliness in her eyes when she talked about wanting someone to see past the money. She wasn't what he'd expected, wasn't the cold billionaire or the desperate older woman. She was just someone trying to build a life that made sense to her, even if it looked insane to everyone else. Kind of like him. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel arranged for Ethan to stay with his parents, claiming a work conference in New York. They asked questions he deflected. His mother gave him a look that said she knew he was hiding something but wouldn't push yet. He told Ethan about the trip Thursday night during their bedtime routine. I have to go away for a few days, buddy, for work stuff. To New York again? Yeah, Grandma and Grandpa are going to stay with you. That okay? I guess. Are you going to see that friend again? The one from before? Kids were too perceptive. Possibly. Why? Because you've been acting weird since you saw her last time. Not bad weird, just different. Daniel smoothed Ethan's hair back, the gesture automatic and soothing. How am I different? Less stressed, I think. You smile more. Ethan yawned. I like it. Good. Because I'm trying, E. I'm trying to make things better for us. Things are already good, Dad. We're a good team, remember? The best team. But maybe we're about to get even better. Ethan fell asleep before Daniel could say more, which was probably for the best. How do you tell your 7-year-old that you're about to try to give him a sibling with a woman you barely know? That his life is about to get more complicated but hopefully better? You don't. Not yet. You wait until there's something real to tell. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Daniel packed a bag, enough for 3 days, which felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. He kissed Ethan goodbye, endured his mother's searching questions, and took the train into the city because having James pick him up from Connecticut felt like too much. Victoria texted as his train pulled into Grand Central. The doorman knows you're coming. Make yourself comfortable. I'll be home by 7. We can have dinner and just see how things go. See how things go. As if this was a normal evening between friends, and not the prelude to attempting to conceive a child. The penthouse was exactly as he remembered, stunning, expensive, slightly intimidating. But this time, Victoria had left signs of actual life. A book on the coffee table, a laptop on the dining table surrounded by papers, a coffee mug in the sink, small evidence that a real person lived here, not just a billionaire. Daniel found the guest room Victoria had mentioned via text. It was larger than his bedroom at home, with its own bathroom and a view that probably cost more per square foot than his entire house. He unpacked his modest bag, feeling ridiculous about the worn toiletries and department store pajamas. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe through the anxiety. In a few hours, Victoria would come home. They'd have dinner. They'd talk. And then if the timing was right, they'd attempt what they'd agreed to with lawyers and contracts and completely insufficient preparation. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. You doing okay? Remember to breathe. Remember this is your choice. Remember you're not doing anything wrong. Daniel smiled, grateful for a friend who could read his panic from 200 miles away. Terrified, but okay. Thanks for checking. That's normal. Hell, I was terrified before my first kid and I was married and everything was traditional. You're allowed to be scared. What if I can't do this? Then you'll figure out an alternative. But Daniel, I think you can. I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. Daniel held on to those words as the afternoon faded into evening. He explored the penthouse, careful not to intrude, but curious about Victoria's life. Her bookshelves held an eclectic mix: business books, science fiction, poetry. Her kitchen was pristine but well-equipped, suggesting someone who wanted to cook but rarely had time. Photos were scarce, but he found one on a shelf. Young Victoria with her parents, before success and money, just a family trying to get by. She'd come so far, worked so hard, and now she wanted the one thing money couldn't buy. The elevator chimed at 6:50. Victoria stepped out, still in work clothes, but looking worn in a way he hadn't seen before. She set down her briefcase, kicked off her heels, and smiled when she saw him. Hi. Hi. They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd agreed to something intimate but hadn't figured out how to bridge the gap between agreement and action. I'm going to change, Victoria said. Make yourself a drink if you want. I'll be back in a few minutes. She disappeared into her bedroom, leaving Daniel alone with his nerves and the expensive liquor cabinet. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey he couldn't identify, but that tasted like smoke and oak and confidence he didn't feel. Victoria returned in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, looking more like the girl from their hometown and less like a CEO. She'd removed her makeup, her face open and uncertain. Better, she said, pouring her own drink. I can't do this in work mode. I'll lose my mind. What mode should you be in? Honestly, I have no idea. This isn't covered in any manual I've read. They ordered Thai food because neither of them felt like cooking or going out. Ate sitting on the floor by the coffee table because the formal dining room felt wrong. Talked about everything except what they were there to do. Victoria told him about a board meeting that had gone sideways, about competitors circling, about the constant pressure of being responsible for thousands of employees. Daniel talked about Ethan's latest school project, about department politics, about the small dramas that made up ordinary life. I envy that, Victoria said suddenly. What, teaching community college? No, the ordinariness of it, the small stakes. Don't get me wrong, I love my work. But sometimes I miss when my biggest problem was passing a test or making a friend laugh. You can have ordinary problems too. They're not mutually exclusive. They kind of are when you're me. She set down her fork. That's why this feels important. A child won't care about my net worth or my company's stock price. They'll just want mom. That's the most ordinary, essential thing in the world. Daniel reached across the coffee table, covered her hand with his. The touch was electric, not romantic, but significant. You're going to be a good mom. I can already tell. How? Because you care this much about doing it right. The bad parents are the ones who don't worry. Her fingers curled around his. You're good at this. The reassurance thing. 3 years of solo parenting. You learn to fake confidence even when you're terrified. They cleaned up dinner together, moving around the kitchen in tentative coordination. Victoria loaded the dishwasher wrong and Daniel resisted the urge to fix it. He put the leftovers in containers she didn't know she had. Small domestic moments that felt surreal given the context. Finally, there was nothing left to do but face what they'd come here for. They stood in the living room, the city lights painting shadows across the walls. Two people on the edge of something irreversible. I should probably tell you, Victoria said quietly. I'm completely out of my depth here. Same. I mean, obviously I've done this before, but not like this, not with planning and intention and lawyers. More romantic when you're actually in love with the person? Significantly more romantic, also less terrifying. Victoria moved closer, her expression vulnerable. We don't have to do this tonight. We could wait. Build up to it. Or we could just start, see what happens. Daniel took a breath. We're overthinking this. It's biology. It's simple. Nothing about this is simple. No. But maybe that's okay. She studied his face like she was memorizing it. You're sure? No, but I'm here anyway. Me too. The kiss started tentative, more question than answer. Victoria's lips were soft, uncertain, searching. Daniel's hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and something shifted. The awkwardness dissolved into something warmer, more natural. This wasn't romance, wasn't love, but it was connection, real and present and human. They made their way to Victoria's bedroom, shedding clothes and nervousness in equal measure. The enormous bed with its expensive sheets became a space that belonged to neither of their worlds, just two people trying to create something new. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, nervous laughter, adjustments, and clarifications. But there was also tenderness, unexpected chemistry, the strange intimacy of two people being vulnerable together. Afterward, they lay side by side, not touching, but not separate either. That was, Victoria started. Yeah, we should probably do it again, tomorrow, to maximize chances. Very romantic. I wasn't going for romance. I know, but maybe we got some anyway. She turned to look at him, her expression complicated. This doesn't change the agreement. We're still just co-parents. I know. But it was nice. Being with someone who sees me as just Victoria. You are just Victoria. The rest is just stuff you do. She smiled, reached out to touch his face. Stay tonight? I know we said separate rooms, but it's weird to be intimate and then sleep in different zip codes? Exactly that. Daniel stayed. They fell asleep in the enormous bed, not cuddling, but close. Two people who'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross and weren't sure they wanted to. The weekend unfolded in strange domesticity. Morning coffee, careful conversation, long stretches of comfortable silence. They attempted conception twice more, each time less awkward, each time blurring the lines between transaction and genuine connection. Sunday evening, as Daniel packed to leave, Victoria stood in the doorway of the guest room he'd never used. Thank you, she said, for making this less clinical than it could have been. Thanks for being human about it. I was worried you'd approach it like a business merger. I tried. Turns out some things resist corporate thinking. Daniel zipped his bag, turned to face her. What happens now? We wait. I'll know in about 2 weeks if it worked. If it did, we move forward. If not, we try again. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we figure out how to be friends. Real friends. Not just co-parents with a contract. I'd like that. She walked him to the elevator, kissed his cheek in a gesture that felt both casual and significant. Text me when you get home? I will. The train ride back to Connecticut gave him too much time to think. Daniel watched the city disappear, replaced by suburbs and small towns, his normal life waiting for him like clothes he'd grown out of but still had to wear. Everything had changed, and nothing had changed. He was still a single dad, still teaching at a community college, still struggling to make ends meet, but he was also, possibly, about to become a father again, with a woman who lived in a different world but somehow understood him better than most people in his own. The strangest part was how right it felt, how natural it had been to hold her, talk to her, be with her without pretense or performance. They'd set out to have a child through careful planning and clear boundaries. But somewhere in the execution, they'd found something neither had anticipated. Not love, not romance, but connection. Real, honest, human connection. And maybe, Daniel thought as Connecticut rolled past his window, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of Daniel's life. He threw himself into routine with desperate focus, teaching classes, helping Ethan with homework, grading papers until his eyes burned. Anything to avoid obsessively checking his phone for updates from Victoria that wouldn't come yet, couldn't come yet, because biology operated on its own timeline, regardless of how anxious he felt. They texted occasionally, small things. Victoria asking about Ethan's soccer game. Daniel sending a photo of a spectacularly failed attempt at making dinner. Nothing heavy, nothing that acknowledged the massive possibility hanging between them. Just two people learning to be friends while waiting to see if they'd created a life together. On day 13, Victoria called instead of texting. I took a test this morning, she said without preamble. Too early probably. It was negative, but that doesn't mean anything yet. Daniel's heart sank and steadied simultaneously. You okay? I'm fine, just impatient. I've never been good at waiting. I've noticed. Have you told anyone? About us? Daniel thought about Marcus, who knew everything. About his parents, who suspected something. About Ethan, who'd asked twice more about siblings. My best friend knows. That's it. You? No one. I don't really have people I tell things to. Her voice went quiet. That sounds pathetic. It sounds lonely. There's a difference. Is there? They talked for an hour, the conversation meandering from work stress to childhood memories to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It felt normal in a way that shouldn't have been possible given the circumstances. But then, nothing about this situation fit normal parameters. On day 16, Victoria texted at 6 a.m. Positive. I'm pregnant. Daniel was making coffee when the message arrived. He read it 3 times, his hands shaking slightly, coffee forgotten. They'd done it. One weekend, one incredibly unconventional agreement, and now there was a life beginning, a child who would call him Dad, a sibling for Ethan. His phone rang immediately. Did you get my text? Victoria's voice was different, higher, unsteady. Daniel, I'm pregnant. I saw. How are you feeling? Terrified. Elated. Nauseous, but that might be nerves. I took 4 tests to be sure. All positive. She laughed, the sound breaking. We did it. We did it, he echoed, the reality settling into his bones. Victoria, we're having a baby. We're having a baby. She was crying now, no longer trying to hide it. I'm sorry. I don't usually... I'm just overwhelmed. Hey, it's okay. This is overwhelming. You're allowed to feel everything. Are you happy? Please tell me you're happy about this. Daniel sat down at his kitchen table, looked around at his small life about to get infinitely more complicated. I'm terrified too. But yeah, Victoria, I'm happy, really happy. They stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, making plans. Doctor's appointments. when to tell people, how to navigate the next 9 months. Practical details that felt surreal to discuss. After they hung up, Daniel sat in his kitchen with cold coffee and a head full of impossible futures. He had to tell Ethan, had to tell his parents, had to figure out how to explain this to everyone who would ask questions he couldn't fully answer. But first he had to process it himself. He was going to be a father again. The thought brought grief and joy in equal measure. Sarah should have been here for this. They should have been planning their second child together, in their own home, in their own time. But Sarah was gone, and Daniel was here. And life had given him this strange second chance with a woman who barely knew him but trusted him with something irreplaceable. That evening, after Ethan was fed and bathed and ready for their bedtime routine, Daniel sat on the edge of his son's bed and took a breath. "Hey, buddy, remember when we talked about you maybe having a sibling someday?" Ethan's eyes went wide. "Really? You're getting married?" "No, not exactly. It's a little more complicated than that." Daniel chose his words carefully. "I have a friend, someone I knew when I was younger. She wants to be a mom, and she asked if I would help her have a baby." Ethan's face scrunched up in confusion. "How do you help someone have a baby?" "Well, it takes two people to make a baby, a mom and a dad. She asked if I would be the dad." "So you're going to have a baby with someone who's not mom?" The question came out small, worried. Daniel's chest tightened. "Yeah, buddy, but that doesn't mean I loved your mom any less. And it doesn't mean this new baby is replacing anything. Your mom will always be your mom, and she'll always be important to us." Ethan was quiet, processing. "Will the baby live with us?" "Sometimes. They'll live with their mom most of the time, but they'll visit us. And you'll get to be a big brother, which is a pretty important job." "Will I like them?" "I think you will. But even if it takes time, that's okay. This is new for all of us." Ethan picked at his blanket, his face serious in the way only children could be when wrestling with big concepts. "Is your friend nice?" "She's very nice. Smart too. I think you'll like her." "What's her name?" "Victoria. And I'm going to introduce you to her soon, okay? So you can meet her and ask her any questions you want." "Okay." Ethan yawned, the weight of the conversation settling on him. "Dad, are you happy about the baby?" "Yeah, I am. Are you?" "I think so. Can I tell Marcus at school?" "Not yet, buddy. We need to keep it private for a little while longer, but soon." "Okay. Love you, Dad." "Love you too. More than all the pirates in all the oceans." "That's still a lot of pirates." Daniel kissed his forehead and left him to sleep, feeling like he'd just navigated a minefield successfully, but barely. One conversation down. About 1,000 more to go. His parents were next, and he dreaded it more than he wanted to admit. He drove to their house on Saturday morning, leaving Ethan with a friend, needing to do this alone. His mother knew something was wrong the moment he walked in. "Daniel, what's happened?" "Nothing's wrong, Mom. Can we sit down? I need to tell you both something." They sat in the living room where he'd grown up, his childhood home suddenly feeling very small. His father muted the television. His mother folded her hands, waiting with the patient dread of someone expecting bad news. "I'm going to have another child," Daniel said, deciding direct was best. "The baby's due next summer." His mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, hope, concern. "You're seeing someone? Why didn't you tell us?" "It's not like that. I'm not in a relationship." He took a breath. "Do you remember Victoria Hale from our hometown?" "Vicky Hale? The tech billionaire?" His father leaned forward. "What about her?" "She contacted me a few weeks ago. She wants to have a child, and she asked me to be the father. We've worked out an arrangement, legal, clear, everything documented. She's pregnant now. We're having the baby together." The silence was deafening. Finally, his mother spoke. "Daniel, what have you done?" "I've agreed to help someone have a family while also providing better for my own family. This isn't reckless, Mom. It's carefully planned." "Carefully planned?" His father's voice rose. "You barely know this woman. You're having a baby with a stranger like it's a business deal." "She's not a stranger. We grew up together, and yes, there are legal agreements, but that's to protect everyone, especially the child." His mother's eyes were wet. "What about Ethan?" What about our grandson? How is he supposed to understand this? I've already told him. He took it better than you are right now. Don't be flippant. His mother stood, pacing. This is insane. You're struggling as it is. How are you going to manage two children with two different mothers in two different places? Victoria is providing financial support. Significant support. Ethan will have opportunities I could never give him otherwise. We'll have security, stability. So she bought you. His father's words were harsh. That's what this is. She's rich, you're desperate, and she's buying herself a baby daddy. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? Come on, Daniel. You expect us to believe this is about anything other than money? It's about a lot of things. Yes, the financial support matters. I won't apologize for wanting to provide better for my son. But it's also about giving Ethan a sibling, about helping someone who wants to be a mother, about building something unconventional that still has value. His mother sat back down, her face pale. What would Sarah think? The question was designed to wound, and it succeeded. Sarah would want Ethan and me to be happy and secure. She'd want me to move forward with my life instead of staying stuck in grief. By having a child with someone you don't love? I loved Sarah, I'll always love Sarah, but she's gone, Mom, and I'm still here, still living, still trying to build a life. This is part of that life now. They argued for another hour. His parents cycled through anger, hurt, disappointment, fear. Daniel held firm, explaining the arrangement until his voice went hoarse, defending his choice even as doubt crept in around the edges. Were they right? Was he making a massive mistake? Using Victoria's money to justify something fundamentally wrong? But then he thought about Ethan's face when he talked about being a big brother, about Victoria's tears when she called to say she was pregnant, about the possibility of not living paycheck to paycheck, of breathing without constant financial anxiety. He thought about the weekend in New York, the unexpected connection, the way Victoria had been vulnerable and honest and real. This wasn't perfect, but it wasn't wrong either. His parents didn't come around that day, or the next week, or the one after. They were civil but distant, their disappointment a palpable thing every time Daniel brought Ethan to visit. His mother hugged her grandson tighter, like she was afraid this new baby would somehow replace him. Victoria's first prenatal appointment was at 8 weeks. Daniel took a personal day, drove to New York, met her at a doctor's office that looked more like a luxury hotel. She was already in the waiting room, her posture perfect despite obvious nervousness. When she saw him, relief flooded her face. "You came." "Of course I came. This is our baby." They were called back together, and Daniel felt strangely honored when Victoria reached for his hand as they walked down the hallway. The doctor was professional and warm, asking questions, performing an exam, setting up the ultrasound machine. And then there it was, a tiny flickering heartbeat on the screen, a blob of cells that would become a person, their child. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened. The doctor pointed out features Daniel couldn't quite see, talking about development and due dates and everything being perfectly normal. "Would you like a picture?" the doctor asked. They left with 3 printouts of a grainy image that looked like abstract art, but meant everything. In the elevator down, Victoria stared at the photo like it held the secrets of the universe. "That's our baby," she whispered. "That's really our baby." "Yeah, it really is." They went to lunch at a cafe nearby, sitting across from each other with ultrasound photos on the table between them. "I need to tell my board," Victoria said, pushing food around her plate. "Before someone notices and it becomes gossip. I'm planning to frame it as a personal choice, surrogacy or IVF. Keep you out of it if possible. And when the baby's here, when I'm obviously involved, then we tell the truth. A private arrangement, co-parenting, none of their business beyond how it affects my work." Which it won't. "You're already planning to work through pregnancy?" "I built a company, Daniel. I can't just abandon it because I'm pregnant." "I'm not asking you to abandon it, but you need to take care of yourself too." She smiled slightly. "You're already doing the protective father thing. Someone has to. You'll work yourself into the ground if no one stops you." "Probably." She sipped her water. "My doctor wants me to reduce stress." I nearly laughed. "My entire life is stress." "Then maybe it's time to let some of it go. Delegate? Take time for yourself. That's not how I work. Maybe it should be. You're not just a CEO anymore. You're going to be a mother." The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Victoria set down her fork, her expression vulnerable. "I'm terrified I'll be terrible at it, that I'll prioritize wrong and damage this child the way my parents damaged me." "Your parents didn't damage you. They did their best in impossible circumstances. They were never there. Always working, always stressed. I raised myself. And you turned out pretty well." "Did I? I'm 40 years old with no partner, no close friends, asking a near stranger to father my child because I can't figure out how to have normal relationships." Daniel reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "Stop. You're not damaged or broken or any of the other things you're telling yourself. You made unconventional choices and you're building an unconventional family. That doesn't make it wrong." "Everyone thinks it's wrong. Your parents hate me." "They don't hate you. They're scared for me, which is different, and they'll come around when they meet you. When they see you're real and human and care about this baby. You don't know that." "I know my parents. They'll come around." Victoria's eyes were wet. "Thank you for being here, for showing up, for making this feel less insane. We're in this together, remember? That was the deal." They finished lunch, made plans for the next appointment, said goodbye on the sidewalk with a hug that lasted longer than either expected. Daniel held her, felt the slight tremor in her shoulders, and realized how much weight she'd been carrying alone. Not anymore. Whether his parents approved or society understood, he was committed now. To Victoria, to this child, to figuring out how to make this work. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Weekly phone calls where Victoria updated him on symptoms, and Daniel shared stories about Ethan. Text messages throughout the day, casual and warm. Appointments every few weeks where they'd see their baby growing, becoming more real. Daniel started telling people. His colleagues responded with polite confusion. Marcus called him brave and insane in equal measure. A few friends from his past life with Sarah reached out with concern that felt like judgment. But Ethan remained excited, asking constant questions about when he'd meet Victoria, what the baby would be like, whether he could teach them to play soccer. The meeting happened in December, a month before Christmas. Victoria drove to Connecticut for the first time, meeting Daniel and Ethan at a family restaurant where the stakes felt lower than a formal introduction. Ethan was shy at first, hiding behind Daniel's arm, but Victoria was patient, asking about school and soccer and Lego, meeting him where he was instead of forcing connection. "Your dad talks about you constantly," she told Ethan over chicken fingers. "You're kind of famous in my world." "Really? What does he say?" "That you're smart and funny and the best thing that ever happened to him." Ethan beamed. "Did he tell you I'm going to be a big brother?" "He did. What do you think about that?" "I think it's cool. I'm going to teach them everything I know." "That's a lot of responsibility." "I'm good at responsibility. Right, Dad?" Daniel nodded, his throat tight, watching his two worlds collide. The best. After dinner, they walked through a park strung with Christmas lights. Ethan ran ahead, exploring, while Daniel and Victoria followed at a slower pace. "He's wonderful," Victoria said quietly. "You've done an incredible job with him." "He makes it easy. Well, not easy, but worth it. I hope I can do half as well." "You will. You already care this much, and the baby isn't even born yet." Victoria's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, barely showing but present. 4.5 months to go. I keep waiting to feel ready. I don't think I ever will." "No one feels ready. You just do it anyway." They watched Ethan run through the lights, his laughter carrying on the cold air. Two people who'd started as strangers, building something neither had planned but both were choosing. "My parents want to meet you," Daniel said. "They're still processing, but they want to meet the mother of their grandchild." Victoria's face tensed. "They hate this whole situation." "They're scared. There's a difference. Will you come to Christmas dinner?" "Nothing formal, just family." "I don't want to intrude on your traditions." "You're not intruding. You're part of this now, part of us." She looked at him, snow beginning to fall, lights reflecting in her eyes. "Okay, if you're sure." "I'm sure." Christmas dinner was predictably awkward. His parents were polite but cool, his mother fussing over Ethan while barely acknowledging Victoria. But Victoria held her own, answering questions with grace, winning Ethan over with her attention, slowly cracking his father's skepticism by discussing tech innovation with unexpected depth. By dessert, the temperature had warmed. His mother asked about Victoria's pregnancy, her questions pointed but less hostile. His father offered Victoria a tour of his workshop, showing her his woodworking projects with the shy pride of someone sharing something precious. In the kitchen, while clearing dishes, Daniel's mother cornered him. "She's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone colder, more calculating, but she's just a person, a scared person trying to do something difficult." "Yeah, Mom, that's exactly what she is." His mother touched his arm. "I'm sorry for how I reacted. I was wrong to judge without knowing her, without trusting you." "You were scared for me." "I get it. I'm still scared for you. This is complicated, but I can see you care about her, and she cares about the baby. Maybe that's enough." "It has to be. It's what we have." January brought a public relations crisis neither had anticipated. A gossip blog somehow got wind of Victoria's pregnancy, published a speculative piece about the billionaire CEO and mysterious baby daddy. Within hours, it was picked up by mainstream outlets, each adding their own speculation and judgment. Victoria called him in a panic. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how they found out. I've been so careful." "It's okay. We knew this might happen eventually." "It's not okay. They're dragging you into this, calling you a gold digger, a con artist. Someone even suggested I hired you." Daniel had seen the articles, felt the sting of strangers judging something they couldn't understand. "What do you want to do?" "My PR team wants to release a statement, confirm the pregnancy, keep you anonymous, shut down speculation." "Or we could tell the truth." "Daniel, no, that will make it worse." "Will it? Or will it stop the narrative that we're hiding something shameful? We're two people having a child together. That's it. We don't owe anyone more explanation than that." Victoria was quiet. "You'd be opening yourself to scrutiny. People will dissect every aspect of your life." "They're already doing that. At least this way they'll have facts instead of fiction." They released a joint statement the next day. Simple, honest, carefully worded by lawyers, but stripped of corporate speak. Victoria Hale and Daniel Cross, old friends, co-parenting a child by mutual agreement. Unconventional, but intentional. Private, but not shameful. The internet exploded predictably. Think pieces about modern families, debates about ethics and money, judgments from every angle. Daniel's social media, previously empty, filled with messages ranging from supportive to vicious. But something unexpected happened too. Messages from other single parents, from people in unconventional arrangements, from those who'd built families outside traditional structures. Stories of support and understanding, of recognition that family could mean many things. Victoria called him late one night, 2 weeks after the statement. "Are you okay? Really?" "I'm fine. Better than fine. I got a message today from a woman who had a child with her best friend after her husband died. She said our story made her feel less alone." We're accidentally advocates for alternative families. Accidentally, yeah, but maybe that's not bad. Maybe someone needed to see that this could work. "Is it working?" Victoria's voice was soft. "For you?" Daniel thought about his life now versus 3 months ago. The financial security, yes, but also the conversations with Victoria, the growing friendship, Ethan's excitement, his parents slowly warming, the strange rightness of it all despite the chaos. "Yeah, Victoria, it's working. How about for you?" "It's terrifying and wonderful and not at all what I expected. But yes, it's working." February brought their anatomy scan. They'd agreed not to find out the gender, wanting some surprises in this carefully planned arrangement. But seeing the baby on screen, fully formed now, tiny fingers and toes, and a face that looked almost human, that was surprise enough. "Healthy and developing perfectly," the technician said. "Everything looks great." In the parking lot afterward, Victoria leaned against her car, crying with relief and hormones and overwhelming emotion. "Hey!" Daniel pulled her into a hug. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's our baby, Daniel. Our actual baby who's going to be here in 4 months. And I'm not ready. I'm nowhere near ready." "No one's ever ready." You keep saying that. Because it's true. But you're not doing this alone. I'll be there. For all of it. She pulled back, searching his face. Why are you so good to me? You could have taken the money and stayed distant, but you keep showing up. Because that's what partners do. And because somewhere along the way, you became my friend. Real friend, not just co-parent. Friends, she echoed, like she was testing the word. I haven't had many of those. Well, you have one now, possibly the most unconventional friendship ever, but still. She laughed through tears. Definitely unconventional. They stood in the parking lot, an unlikely pair bound by choice and biology, and something neither could quite name. The baby kicked, visible even through Victoria's coat, and they both stared at the movement with wonder. 4 more months, Victoria said. 4 more months, Daniel agreed. Then everything changes again. Then everything changes again. But standing there, watching his friend navigate pregnancy and public scrutiny and her own fears with more courage than she gave herself credit for, Daniel realized something had already changed. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. This was a family, different, unconventional, assembled from spare parts and honest intentions. But a family nonetheless. And he wouldn't trade it for anything. March arrived with unseasonable warmth and Victoria's growing anxiety about the rapidly approaching due date. She'd taken a partial leave from her company, still attending critical meetings but delegating more than Daniel had ever seen her delegate. The control she'd once wielded so tightly was loosening by necessity, and watching her learn to trust others with her life's work was like witnessing someone learn to breathe underwater. Daniel had started spending weekends in New York, bringing Ethan along so his son could build a relationship with Victoria before the baby arrived. They'd developed their own strange routines. Saturday morning breakfast at a diner Victoria had discovered, afternoon walks through Central Park, evenings watching movies in the penthouse while Victoria fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by the simple act of growing a human. One Saturday in late March, while Ethan was absorbed in building an elaborate Lego city on Victoria's living room floor, she pulled Daniel aside to the kitchen. I've been thinking about something, she said, her hand unconsciously rubbing her swollen belly. The baby was due in 6 weeks, and she looked perpetually uncomfortable now, though she never complained. About after the baby comes, about custody and schedules and how this actually works. Daniel poured them both water, settling against the counter. Okay, what are you thinking? The agreement says the baby lives primarily with me, visits with you on weekends and holidays, standard split custody. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But I don't think that's what I want anymore. His stomach tightened. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be a part-time parent in my child's life, and I don't want you to be either. I want... She struggled, her usual articulate precision failing her. I want us to actually be a family. Not 2 separate households that share a child. One family that happens to have an unconventional structure. Victoria, what are you saying? I'm saying I want you here. In New York. Close enough that we can do this together. Really together. Not you 2 hours away doing your part while I do mine. I want the baby to wake up and see both of us. I want Ethan to have a home here too, where his sibling lives, where we all exist together. Daniel's heart was racing. You want me to move to New York? I want to make this real. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I could set you up with a teaching position at Columbia, somewhere that values you instead of exploiting you as adjunct labor. Or you could do something else entirely. You have skills my company could use, or you could consult, or frankly, do whatever you want because the money isn't an issue. She was talking faster now, nervous energy pouring out. I could find you an apartment in this building or nearby. Somewhere that's yours, but close enough that we're not constantly arranging logistics. Ethan could go to an incredible school. You'd have time actually be a parent instead of constantly scrambling to survive. You've really thought about this. I haven't thought about anything else. Her eyes were bright, desperate. I know it's asking a lot. I know it means uprooting your entire life. But Daniel, I don't want to do this halfway. I don't want to be the weekend mom or the primary parent who occasionally sends the kid to visit their dad. I want us both to be there for everything. First steps and late night fevers and parent-teacher conferences and all of it. Daniel looked through the doorway at Ethan, contentedly building, already comfortable in this space that could become part of his world. He thought about his small house in Connecticut, his adjunct position that barely paid bills. the constant struggle that had defined his life for 3 years. Can I think about it? Something in Victoria's face fell, though she tried to hide it. Of course. I'm not trying to pressure you. It's just an offer, if you want it. That night, after Ethan was asleep in the guest room he'd started calling my New York room, Daniel stood at the penthouse windows looking out at the city that could become his home. Victoria joined him, moving slower now, her body preparing for the monumental task ahead. I'm scared I overstepped, she said quietly, that I'm trying to control this the way I control everything else. You're not controlling, you're planning. There's a difference. Is there? Because I keep thinking about what you said months ago, that I was trying to engineer a child like a project. Maybe that's what I'm doing now, engineering a family because I can't handle the uncertainty of anything else. Daniel turned to face her. Or maybe you're just trying to build the best possible situation for our child. That's not control. That's good parenting. You think so? I think you've spent your whole life trying to create stability because you never had it growing up. That's not a flaw, Victoria. That's survival. He touched her shoulder gently. But I need to think about what's best for Ethan too. Pulling him out of his school, away from his friends, from my parents who are finally accepting this whole situation. That's not a small thing. I know. I'm not trying to minimize that. I know you're not. He sighed. Give me a week. Let me talk to Ethan, figure out what he wants. This affects him as much as it affects us. She nodded, visibly trying to mask her disappointment. A week? That's fair. The conversation with Ethan happened Sunday evening, back in Connecticut, in the familiar surroundings of their small house. Daniel had planned to ease into it, but his son had developed an uncanny ability to sense when something important was coming. You're doing the serious face again, Ethan said, looking up from his homework. I need to ask you something big, something that would change things for us. Okay. Ethan set down his pencil, giving Daniel his full attention in that solemn way that reminded him so much of Sarah. How would you feel about moving to New York? Living there full-time, going to school there, being closer to Victoria and the baby? Ethan's eyes widened. Really? Like forever? Not forever, but for the foreseeable future. It would mean leaving your school, your friends here, but you'd have new opportunities, new experiences, and you'd get to be a big brother every day instead of just on weekends. Would we live with Victoria? No, we'd have our own place nearby, but we'd see her and the baby all the time. Ethan was quiet, thinking with the seriousness of someone weighing life-changing decisions. Would Grandma and Grandpa be sad? They might be at first, but they could visit, and we could visit them. They want us to be happy. Would I still get to do soccer? You could do soccer in New York, probably even better soccer programs. What about my Lego collection? Despite everything, Daniel smiled. The Legos would come with us, buddy. Okay then, I think we should move. Just like that? Ethan shrugged. You're always stressed here, about money and work and stuff. Maybe in New York you'd be less stressed. And I like Victoria. She's nice. And she needs us. She needs us? Yeah, she doesn't have much family. The baby should have lots of family. We could be that family. He said it with such simple clarity, the kind of wisdom that sometimes came from children who'd learned early that family wasn't just about biology. Daniel pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed by this small person's capacity for understanding. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more when I say things you agree with. They told Daniel's parents together the following weekend. His mother cried, though she insisted they were happy tears mixed with sad ones. His father pulled him aside after dinner. You're doing the right thing, son. That woman needs you. The baby needs you. And frankly, you need them too. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Better late than never. Your mother and I have been talking. We want to help. With the move, with Ethan's transition, whatever you need. This is our grandchild too, both of them. The acceptance Daniel had been craving finally arrived, bittersweet and perfect. April came with cherry blossoms and final preparations. Daniel gave notice at the college, endured awkward goodbyes with colleagues who'd never quite known what to make of him. He packed up the house he'd shared with Sarah, each box a small letting go, each decision about what to keep and what to donate a tiny grief. Ethan helped with surprising maturity, sorting through his own belongings, making choices about what mattered enough to bring to their new life. He found a photo of Sarah, brought it to Daniel with careful hands. "We're bringing Mom too, right?" "Always, buddy. She's part of us. That doesn't change." Victoria found them an apartment 3 floors below hers in the same building. It was smaller than the penthouse, but enormous compared to their Connecticut house, with 2 bedrooms, views of the city, and enough space for Ethan's Lego empire to sprawl. She'd furnished it carefully, balancing Daniel's need for independence with thoughtful touches that showed she'd been paying attention to their preferences. "If you hate anything, we can change it," she said anxiously when she showed them the space for the first time. "I didn't want to overstep, but I thought having it ready would be easier than moving into an empty apartment." "It's perfect," Daniel said, and meant it. Ethan ran from room to room, claiming the bigger bedroom because the baby will need to visit sometimes, already planning where his toys would go, which wall would be best for posters. The move happened in late April, a whirlwind of logistics made easier by Victoria's resources and Daniel's determination to maintain some independence. He insisted on hiring his own movers, on handling his own boxes, on doing the physical labor of rebuilding his life, even though Victoria offered to have people do it all. "Let me do this part," he told her. "Let me feel like I'm earning this new start." She understood without him having to explain further. By the first week of May, they were settled. Ethan started at his new school, intimidated but excited. Daniel began consulting work for a tech education startup, using his teaching experience to develop curriculum, working from home on a schedule that actually allowed him to be present for his son. The financial pressure that had defined his adult life simply dissolved, replaced by breathing room he still didn't quite trust. And Victoria, now 9 months pregnant and moving like she was carrying a bowling ball, began the final countdown. The baby came on a Tuesday night in mid-May, 3 days before the due date. Victoria's water broke during a business dinner she'd insisted on attending despite Daniel's protests. She called him from the car, her voice tight with pain and poorly concealed panic. "It's happening. I'm on my way to the hospital. Can you meet me there?" Daniel had Ethan at his parents' place within 30 minutes. They'd come to New York for the final week, anticipating this moment, and arrived at the hospital to find Victoria already in a delivery room, breathing through contractions with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. "About time," she gasped as he entered. "I was starting to think I'd have to do this alone." "Not a chance." He took her hand and she gripped it hard enough to hurt. The next 8 hours were a blur of medical staff, monitors, Victoria's pain and Daniel's helplessness in the face of it. He'd been through this before with Sarah, but it didn't make it easier to watch someone he cared about suffer through the brutal mechanics of bringing life into the world. "I can't do this," Victoria said at hour 6, exhausted and overwhelmed. "It's too much. I can't." "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong. I'm terrified." "Strong people get terrified. They do it anyway." He wiped sweat from her forehead. "You've got this. I'm right here." At 4:47 a.m., with the sun just beginning to hint at rising, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that seemed impossibly loud for something so small. The nurse placed her on Victoria's chest, and Daniel watched his co-parent transform into a mother right before his eyes. "Oh," Victoria breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, she's perfect." She was. Tiny and red and screaming, but absolutely perfect. The nurse gestured for Daniel to come closer, to see his daughter, and the weight of it hit him all at once. Another child. Another person who would call him dad, who he'd love and worry about and try desperately not to fail. "Want to cut the cord?" the nurse asked. His hand shook, but he did it. This final separation that made their daughter her own person. Then she was being cleaned and measured and returned to Victoria, who couldn't stop staring at her like she'd performed an actual miracle. "We need a name," Victoria said softly. "We never decided." They'd discussed options, debated meanings and family connections, but never landed on anything definitive. Now looking at this tiny person who'd brought them together in the strangest way possible, Daniel knew. "Hope," he said. "Her name should be Hope." Victoria looked up at him, her expression crumbling. "Hope Elizabeth Cross Hale. Is that okay? Elizabeth after your mother? It's perfect. They spent the first hour alone with Hope, taking turns holding her, marveling at her tiny fingers and perfect features. Victoria tried to nurse, awkward and uncertain, while Daniel coached her through it with memories from Ethan's infancy. You're a natural, he lied kindly. I'm a disaster. How do people do this? Badly, mostly, but with enough love to make up for the incompetence. His parents arrived at 7 with Ethan, who'd been up since Daniel's early morning text. His son stood at the doorway, suddenly shy, staring at the bundle in Victoria's arms. Want to meet your sister? Victoria asked gently. Ethan approached slowly, then faster, until he was right beside the bed. Victoria shifted Hope so he could see her properly. She's so small, Ethan whispered. You were this small once. Really? Really? Want to hold her? With Daniel's help, they arranged Ethan on the bed, supporting Hope carefully in his arms. The look on his son's face, wonder and love and the beginning of understanding what it meant to be a big brother, made every complicated choice that had led to this moment worth it. Hi, Hope, Ethan said softly. I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you everything. Daniel's mother was crying openly now. His father's arm was around her, both of them watching their family expand in ways they'd never imagined. She's beautiful, his mother said, moving closer to stroke Hope's cheek. Absolutely beautiful. You did good, sweetheart. She said it to Victoria, and the younger woman's eyes filled with fresh tears. The next few days were a haze of hospital rooms, nursing struggles, visitors, and the overwhelming reality of caring for a newborn. Victoria had arranged for a night nurse, but she kept sending the woman away, determined to do it herself, to prove she could handle it. By day 3, she was exhausted and emotional, crying over failed attempts to breastfeed, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility she'd wanted so desperately. I'm doing everything wrong, she sobbed to Daniel at 2 a.m., both of them awake with a fussy Hope. I can't get her to latch right. I don't know if she's eating enough. What if I'm already failing? You're not failing. You're learning. It's different. You make it look so easy. I make it look practiced. I've done this before, remember? And even then I failed constantly. Sarah and I had no idea what we were doing with Ethan. We just figured it out as we went. How long until I figure it out? About 18 years? Maybe longer. She laughed despite herself, exhausted and punch-drunk. Hope settled in Daniel's arms, her crying tapering to snuffles. Look at that, Victoria said. She likes you better already. She doesn't like anyone better. She's 3 days old. She just wants to be warm and fed and safe. You provide all of that. We provide all of that. I couldn't do this without you, Daniel. I know I said I wanted to do it myself to prove I could handle it, but I can't. I need you. Good thing I'm here, then. They brought Hope home on day 4, both parents terrified of the car ride, of the vulnerability of this tiny person in the massive city. But they made it safely to the building, to Victoria's penthouse, to the nursery she'd prepared with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything else. Ethan was waiting with Daniel's parents, desperate to help. They'd prepared dinner, stocked the fridge, handled all the logistics that new parents couldn't manage. Over the next week, they established a rhythm, Daniel's mother teaching Victoria things she'd never learned, his father entertaining Ethan while the adults focused on the baby, all of them working together to support this unusual family structure. But eventually Daniel's parents had to return to Connecticut, leaving Daniel and Victoria to navigate co-parenting without a buffer. The first night alone was chaos. Hope cried for hours, nothing soothing her. Victoria was in tears herself, hormones and exhaustion overwhelming her usual composure. Daniel took Hope, walked her around the penthouse, tried every trick he remembered from Ethan's infancy. Finally, at 3 a.m., he made a decision. Come on, he told Victoria. Bring your stuff. Where are we going? Downstairs to my apartment. You both are. Daniel, I can't impose. You're not imposing. You need help. I can provide help. Stop being stubborn and accept it. They relocated to Daniel's apartment, Victoria too tired to argue. He set her up in his bedroom with Hope, took the couch for himself, and for the next week they existed in close quarters, figuring out how to be parents together without the buffer of separate spaces. It was intimate in ways that had nothing to do with sex. Victoria nursing at 2 a.m. while Daniel heated bottles as backup, both of them functioning on 2 hours of sleep, trading off diaper changes and soothing duties, learning Hope's patterns and preferences together. Ethan loved it. He'd wake up to find Victoria making coffee in their kitchen, Hope sleeping in a bassinet nearby, and treat it like the most natural thing in the world. "Is Victoria living with us now?" he asked one morning. "Just temporarily, until she feels more confident handling things alone." "Oh, I was hoping it was permanent." Daniel looked at his son, then at Victoria feeding Hope at the breakfast table, her hair a mess and wearing one of his old shirts because she'd forgotten to pack enough clothes. At the disaster of their living room, covered in baby supplies and Lego constructions. At this strange, imperfect family they'd assembled from spare parts and honest intentions. "Maybe it could be," he said quietly. Victoria looked up, caught his eye, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or possibility. The temporary arrangement stretched into 2 weeks, then 3. Victoria kept saying she should go back upstairs, establish independence, prove she could handle it. But every time she tried, something came up. Hope had a rough night. Ethan wanted to show her something. Daniel made dinner, and it seemed wasteful for her to eat alone. Finally, one evening in June, with Hope asleep in the bassinet and Ethan at a sleepover, Victoria and Daniel sat on the couch with glasses of wine they were both too tired to drink. "I should go back upstairs," Victoria said, without conviction. "You should do whatever makes you happy." "What if this makes me happy? Being here, with you and Ethan, playing house like we're an actual family. Then maybe we should stop pretending it's temporary." She turned to face him fully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this is working. The 4 of us together figuring it out as we go. I'm saying I like having you here. I like sharing breakfast and midnight feedings and all the chaos. I'm saying Ethan loves you, Hope needs both of us, and somewhere along the way this stopped being an arrangement and became something real." "Daniel," her voice broke, "I can't ask you to commit to this. To me. I'm a mess. I'm controlling and stubborn, and I have no idea what I'm doing half the time." "Neither do I, but we're figuring it out together. That's what makes it work." "But what about romance? What about love? We agreed this wasn't that. We agreed a lot of things when we didn't know what this would actually feel like." Daniel set down his wine, took her hand. "I'm not saying I'm in love with you. I'm not ready for that, and I don't think you are either. But I care about you. I trust you. I want to build this life with you, whatever shape it takes." "What if that shape eventually includes love? Would that be okay?" His heart kicked up. "Would you want it to?" "I don't know, maybe. Someday." She squeezed his hand. "You're my best friend, Daniel. The only real friend I've had in years. I don't want to lose that by complicating things. Or maybe we'd gain something by letting things complicate naturally. No pressure, no timeline, just seeing what happens." "But..." They sat with that, the possibility hanging between them like Hope's mobile catching light. "I don't want to go back upstairs," Victoria admitted. "I want to stay here, with you, with all of us. Then stay." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She leaned against him, exhausted and hopeful. "This isn't how I planned any of this. Plans are overrated," says the man who color codes his son's homework folders. "I contain multitudes." They fell asleep on the couch, waking hours later to Hope's cries, moving in synchronized exhaustion to care for her together. In the morning, they didn't discuss Victoria leaving. She just stayed and kept staying until her staying became permanent. Summer unfolded in a haze of new parenthood and growing partnership. They settled into routines that worked for them, Victoria working remotely several days a week, Daniel handling school drop-off and pickup for Ethan, both of them tag-teaming Hope's care with increasing confidence. They had their first real fight in July, about sleeping arrangements and boundaries, both of them exhausted and snapping at each other. Victoria stormed off to the bedroom, Daniel slept on the couch, and in the morning they apologized awkwardly over coffee. "We're going to fight sometimes," Daniel said. "That's normal. We work through it." "I'm not good at fighting. I usually just cut people off." "Well, you can't cut off the father of your child. We're stuck with each other." "Lucky me. Lucky both of us." They went to counseling, not because anything was wrong, but because they wanted to do this right. A therapist who specialized in alternative family structures helped them navigate boundaries, communication, the complicated dynamics of co-parenting while potentially becoming something more. "What do you want this to be?" the therapist asked in their third session. They looked at each other, these two people who'd started as strangers and become essential to each other. "I want us to be happy," Victoria said. "Whatever that looks like." "Same," Daniel agreed. "I want Ethan and Hope to grow up loved and secure. I want Victoria and me to be partners in whatever form that takes. I want to stop overthinking and just live." "That's a good goal," the therapist said. "Living, being present, letting things evolve naturally." In August, they made it official in the smallest way possible. Not marriage. Neither of them was ready for that, and it felt unnecessary given their legal agreements. But they went to dinner, just the two of them, after months of only seeing each other in the context of children and logistics. They dressed up, made reservations at a nice restaurant, held hands across the table and talked about things that had nothing to do with diapers or feeding schedules. "Is this a date?" Victoria asked over dessert. "I think it might be. Our first real one, anyway. Only took us a year and a baby to get here. We're very efficient." She laughed, the sound free and genuine. "I never thought I'd have this. Any of this. A child, a partner, a family. I thought I'd resign myself to being alone." "You're not alone. You're stuck with me and two kids and all the chaos that comes with it. Best decision I ever made, asking you, taking that risk. Best decision I ever made was saying yes." They kissed goodnight at her door, technically still his door since they shared the apartment now, and it felt like a beginning instead of a continuation, like choosing each other again, this time with full knowledge of what they were getting into. By fall, life had settled into something resembling normal. If normal could include a billionaire CEO co-parenting with a former adjunct professor while living in a Manhattan high-rise with two kids and no clear label for their relationship. Ethan thrived in his new school, making friends, excelling in ways that had been harder in Connecticut. Hope grew from newborn to infant, her personality emerging, stubborn like her mother, thoughtful like her father, absolutely adored by her big brother. Daniel's parents visited monthly, his mother teaching Victoria to cook family recipes, his father building elaborate Lego constructions with Ethan and talking tech innovation with Victoria. The family they'd all chosen, strange and unconventional, but undeniably real. In October, Victoria had to travel for work, her first trip since Hope's birth. She was anxious about leaving, about being away from her daughter, about trusting Daniel to handle everything alone. "I've done this before," he reminded her. "I've got this." "I know. Intellectually I know. But emotionally I'm a mess." "Call every night. FaceTime with Hope. We'll be fine, and so will you." She was gone for 3 days. Daniel managed drop-offs and pickups, work and feedings, Ethan's homework and Hope's sleep regression. It was exhausting, and he missed Victoria's help, but he also proved to both of them that he could handle it. When she returned, exhausted from travel but energized from work, she found them all asleep on the couch. Daniel with Hope on his chest, Ethan curled against his side, some kid's movie playing on TV. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they'd built. Daniel woke, saw her, smiled. "Welcome home." "This is home," she whispered. "You are. All of you." The proposal happened on a random Tuesday in November, nothing planned or orchestrated. They were doing dishes after dinner, Ethan and Hope both asleep, just existing in comfortable domestic silence. "Marry me," Daniel said, handing her a plate to dry. Victoria nearly dropped it. "What?" "Marry me. Not because we have to, or because it changes anything legally. We have all those protections already, but because I want to. Because I love you, Victoria." Somewhere between the lawyers and the ultrasounds and the 3 a.m. feedings, I fell in love with you. She set down the plate with shaking hands. "You love me?" "Completely. Messily. Not how I loved Sarah, which was young and easy. This is different, complicated and earned and built from honesty. But it's real. It's love. I love you too." She was crying now. "I didn't want to say it first, didn't want to pressure you or assume this was more than co-parenting, but I love you, Daniel. You and Ethan and this life we've built. So marry me." Not for the kids or the optics or any practical reason. Marry me because we're already a family, and I want to make it official." "Yes. God, yes." They kissed in their kitchen, water running in the sink, dishes forgotten. Two people who'd approached family as a careful arrangement and discovered love in the execution. They married in December, a small ceremony in the penthouse with just family present. Ethan was ring bearer. Hope was technically the flower girl, though she mostly just slept through it. Both sets of grandparents cried, and Marcus gave a speech about unconventional choices and unexpected happiness. "I take you, Victoria," Daniel said when it was time for vows, "not as a business arrangement or co-parenting agreement, but as my partner, my friend, my love. You showed me that family isn't about following rules. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other every day." "I take you, Daniel," Victoria replied, her voice strong despite tears, "as proof that the best things in life are the ones you never see coming. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed: partnership, patience, love that doesn't demand perfection. You made me a mother, but more than that, you made me believe I deserved this happiness." The kiss was sweet and simple, witnessed by the people who mattered most. Afterward, over champagne and cake, Daniel's mother pulled Victoria aside. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for how I reacted at first, for judging before I understood. You were protecting your son. I understand that now. I'd do the same for Hope. You're good for him. Good for both my grandbabies. Welcome to the family, officially." "I've been part of the family for months." "I know, but now you know we know it too." The first year of their marriage was an adjustment. They fought about work-life balance, about Victoria's tendency to solve problems with money instead of time, about Daniel's reluctance to accept help even when he needed it. But they also laughed more than either had in years, built traditions with the kids, learned to navigate partnership with honesty instead of pretense. Hope took her first steps on a Tuesday afternoon, both parents there to witness it. Ethan read his first chapter book to his sister, patient and proud. They had family dinners, chaotic and imperfect. They took vacations where everything went wrong, but made better memories than planned perfection ever could. Victoria stepped back from her company more, delegating to executives she'd trained, trusting them with her legacy so she could build a different kind of legacy at home. Daniel took a position teaching computer science at a private school, work that challenged him and paid fairly, where he could make a difference without sacrificing time with his family. They weren't perfect. Some days were hard. Hope went through a phase of only wanting Victoria. Ethan struggled with feeling caught between his memories of Sarah and his love for his new family. Money created tensions, Victoria's instinct to spend, Daniel's need to contribute meaningfully. But they worked through it, together, like they'd promised. On Hope's second birthday, surrounded by family and friends in the beautiful chaos of a toddler party, Daniel found Victoria in the kitchen stealing a quiet moment. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay. Just overwhelmed in the best way." She gestured at the living room full of people. 2 years ago, I was alone in a penthouse, wondering if I'd ever have this. Now look, he echoed. "Thank you for saying yes to my crazy proposal, for building this with me, for loving me when I was certain I was unlovable." "You were never unlovable, just lonely. There's a difference." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Best decision I ever made. Asking you. Best decision I ever made was seeing past the crazy to the possibility." Ethan appeared in the doorway, Hope on his hip. At 9, he was already a natural big brother, patient and loving with his sister. "Hope wants to open presents, can we?" They returned to the party, to the family they'd chosen and built and fought for. It looked nothing like either of them had imagined. A billionaire and a teacher, 2 kids from different mothers, grandparents who'd learned to accept the unconventional, friends who'd watched this unlikely family take shape. But it was theirs, built not on traditional foundations, but on honesty, intention, and the courage to believe that family could mean anything you needed it to mean. That night, after presents were opened and guests departed and both kids were asleep, Daniel and Victoria collapsed on the couch. "We did good," Victoria said, her head on his shoulder. "We did great. Think we can keep doing it for the next 16 years? Longer than that. Kids don't stop needing parents at 18. "Fair point." She yawned. "I'm exhausted." Birthday parties will do that. Worth it, though. Always worth it. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as an arrangement and become everything to each other. The city sparkled beyond their windows, full of millions of lives and millions of choices. But here, in this quiet moment, their choices had led them exactly where they needed to be. Together. Imperfect. Complete. A family built not by accident or tradition, but by intention. And that made all the difference.